Jersey.
Isn't it about time for somebody's favorite radio program?
Yeah. 97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. I can't see him, but he talks to me.
Now, live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
You think you know me?
Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill on a Wednesday hump day edition of 97.3 ESPN FM and a 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. You know, the All-Star break is always a strange time of year for sports because of the fact that it's like sports is still going on, but it feels like everything is kind of like in cruise control at this point. But we are counting down the days, Eagles training camp, Phillies after the All-Star break. You know, the Phillies really much had very little impact in the All-Star game last night. That was a little annoying. I mean, Christopher Sanchez came in for 2 outs and they take him out of the game. Like, what is that? I don't understand stuff like that. Like, when Mike McGarry comes on, coming up in about 25 minutes, I gotta ask him about that because I never understood the idea of let's bring a pitcher in for 2 hitters and then immediately pull him out of the game. Like, if you're doing well at something, right? You know, it's like in basketball, you know, or if you have a running back in football who's having a great game, or if you have a basketball player who's making a ton of threes in a row, or if you are a golfer, let's say, and you're nailing every drive. You don't come along and say, you know what? Let's take this guy who's doing well out as soon as possible and put somebody else in. And I don't want to hear the excuse that the All-Star game managers were managing to win the game. Because guess what? It's an exhibition. I'm not sweating an exhibition. So we'll get into all that as well coming up throughout the show. As always, the text board is open at 609-403-0973. David in Violent actually texted before the show even began. So, David in Violent, I see you. I acknowledge you. You will be one of the texts we get to throughout the show. Here's the lineup coming up as I fill in for Mike Gill today. Mike McGarry for the Press of Atlantic City coming up in about 25 minutes from now. Rob Maaddi from the Associated Press covers the NFL as a whole. We'll get into it with him coming up at 3:20. You know, what's going on with Brandon Ayuk? Eagles count down the training camp. We'll get into all of that coming up. Jeff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com, will join us coming up as is each every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Nick Earnshaw is back for Knicks Nuggets coming up at 4:30 today. And, of course, if you listen to Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN, friend of mine, Andy McNamara, NFL podcaster and fantasy sports analyst, he will join me coming up at 5:20 because I am literally going to steal a conversation idea that him and I had last night and bring it to the show today, which is how do we legitimately rank some of these players? Because everyone on planet Earth has a, hey, this is what we think should be the best receivers in the NFL, or the best quarterbacks, or the best running backs, but I'm going to get Andy to answer the question that he asked me last night, today on 97.3 ESPN, coming up at 5:20. And I know Andy will have an answer. I'm not saying that I'm going to agree with his answer, but I know he's going to have an answer. And of course, your guys' thoughts and comments throughout the show. 609-403-0973 is the text board. Also, your DMs into the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. But before we get to anything else, also I will get to New York Giants GM Joe Schoen again embarrassing himself. I don't know of a single other NFL team is ever going to want to be on Hard Knocks ever again after last night. We'll get to that as well. But I did want to hit on the All-Star break because where the Phillies are at the All-Star break is a very interesting conversation. And I say it's an interesting conversation because you go back to part of what we were discussing in the last couple of days. because it's still relevant right now. And what's relevant about it is the Philadelphia Phillies are the best team in baseball. Okay? They have the best record, the most wins in franchise history before the All-Star game. They are the fourth team in National League history to have 62 wins before the All-Star break. They are on pace for the most wins in Phillies franchise history, 104. But none of that matters if they do not win a World Series. The 9 teams in baseball history that have won 62 or more games before the All-Star break, only one of those teams has won a World Series. That is the 2018 Red Sox. Now, I'm not saying that that is specifically a negative to the current Phillies team, but what I am saying is that if you are the Phillies, you cannot be the team that sits back and says, we already got this figured out. Because only 4 teams have reached the World Series out of the 9 who have done this before you. The 1970 Reds, the 1974 Dodgers, and the 1969 Orioles all lost the World Series. So if the goal is to win a championship, are we concerned that history is not on the Phillies' side? Well, I'm here to tell you that history actually is on the Phillies' side. Because you may not remember this, because for a lot of us, ever since COVID, we don't even know what day and time it is half the time. But in 2018, the man in charge of the Red Sox also happens to be the man in charge of the Philadelphia Phillies right now. In 2018, Dave Dombrowski was the man running baseball operations for the Boston Red Sox. The last few years, Dave Dombrowski has been the man running baseball operations for the Phillies. And Jim Duquette, former Major League Baseball general manager with the Mets and the Red Sox himself, joined Mike Gill on the Sports Bash a couple days ago. And when the topic of Dave Dombrowski came up, this is what Duquette said. And I haven't been able to get this audio out of my head. I wanted to bring it back to you guys on Wednesday, a conversation that Mike had with Jim Duquette on Monday, because I think the key to all of this has to do with Dave Dombrowski. If Dave Dombrowski is the only executive to ever have a team win 62 or more games before the All-Star break and go on to win the World Series, he's the only one. And he just happens to be the Phillies executive right now. What do we need to know about Dave Dombrowski? Former MLB general manager Jim Duquette said this.
Yeah, a lot of people have kind of said, Dave Dombrowski's only going to just add on to the roster in smaller pieces. I would never assume that with Dave. Dave's going to be a Hall of Fame general manager. I've known him for 25 years, and he's one of the best out there at finding, the right fit. And if he has to spend the extra assets and prospect capital, he'll go do that.
He said he's known Dombrowski for 25 years. He said, I have a good idea who this guy is. He's going to do whatever it takes to put the right player in place. Now, I understand that the right player in place may not be the best player available, right? Because I know a lot of you saw that Brett Rooker last weekend hitting bombs, okay? But you forget maybe that Brett Rooker is a journeyman. He has only been a relevant baseball player for the last couple of years with the A's. You've heard the name Luis Robert Jr. You've heard the name Jazz Chisholm. You've heard a lot of names over the last couple weeks of who the Phillies could or could not be targeting. I know some of you texting in at 609-403-0973, some of you out there would say, you know who I want? I want George Springer. Or you might say, you have a player that you, like, for example, I have said Kevin Pillar numerous times. I want Pillar. He's a right-handed bat who could play all 3 outfield positions. So, whoever it is, Duquette says Dombrowski will get the right player. Jim Bowden on MLB Network Sirius XM Radio said this about Dave Dombrowski last week.
The Phillies have made it clear to every GM in the game that they've talked to, or president, that's their target. That's it. And knowing Dave Dombrowski, who, by the way, will someday be a Hall of Famer, the one thing I know about him is when he targets something, he'll get it. And when he targets it, it's not going to be a risk. It's going to be the best. When he targets the best, he gets the best. So Dave's going to get one of those three guys. That's my best guess for the Phillies at the trade deadline. They get one of the three.
The three he's talking about at the time were Luis Robert Jr., Jazz Chisholm, and Cody Bellinger. Now, I know that any of those guys, for a lot of you out there listening on 97.3 ESPN, Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on a Wednesday afternoon, any of those guys would be an upgrade because you desperately need more outfield help. But I will remind you, who did Dave Dombrowski get in 2018? It was not the biggest name. It was Steven Pearce. And I'm sure some of you out there listening, whether on 97.3 ESPN FM or on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle, wherever you're listening to the show, thank you for listening to us here on 97.3. We understand that we live in a world where you may not get the player you want. It's like going car shopping, right? You get to the car lot and you see the vehicle that you want. Then you find out that the vehicle that you want is about $50,000 above your price range. It's $50,000 more than you're willing to dish out, right? Or that you can dish out. So now you got to go with something more economical. So you start looking around. You're like, all right, what can I get that is going to be the best for me and my needs? Maybe I have a family of three. Maybe I do a lot of driving for work, whatever the need is. And you end up getting the vehicle that might not be the fanciest vehicle on the lot, but it ends up being the best vehicle for your needs financially and personally. Steven Pearce was not the biggest name in baseball. He wasn't even the best player in baseball. I mean, I have to go back and look at the 2018 season, but I'm pretty sure he wasn't even a top 20 outfielder at the point. But Steven Pearce ended up being the right player for the Phillies at the right time. He ended up being exactly who the Red Sox needed. And like the Phillies now, Dave Dombrowski, as Duquette and Bowden both said, when he zeroes in on a need, he goes gets it. When he finds the right fit, he goes out and gets it. I am going to go into the trade deadline trusting the guy who's a future Hall of Famer more than, maybe my personal preference. If we don't get Kevin Pillar, if we don't get Cody Bellinger, I'm not going to cry a river over it. I'm going to trust that the guy who's the only executive with a team of 62 or more wins for the All-Star break to win a World Series is going to make the right move. Steven Pearce, by the way, went on to win the World Series MVP that year. He was arguably the most clutch player for the Red Sox run in 2018. Not Mookie Betts, not Xander Bogaerts, not Rafi Devers. No, it ended up being Steven Pearce, the dude that half the world didn't even know who he was, that Dave Dombrowski acquired at the deadline. So that's part of the reason why I know Philadelphia is going to make a move. Because history tells you that if you don't make a move, you are the 70s Dodgers. You are the 70 Reds. You are the 69 Orioles. I mean, the list of teams that had the most wins for the All-Star break is borderline hilarious. 2022 Yankees didn't win anything. 2001 Mariners, most wins in a single season in baseball history. Didn't even get to the World Series that year. We mentioned the 74 and 73 Dodgers. How about the 2018 Yankees? Oh, by the way, they didn't make it to the World Series either. We mentioned the 70 Reds. The whole list, you just go up and down the list, you realize winning the most games before the All-Star break is not a key to success. But maybe, just maybe, Philadelphia has the guy who has the right answer. Text board is open at 609-403-0973. Your DMs into The 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank. I see a couple texts coming into the text board. As promised, David and Violence says, I'm content with the Phillies roster as is, even with this outfield. I think this team is set up to win. I will never say no to adding another arm, but this team is poised to win. David and Violence saying that. David, I agree with you. I don't think that they're a bad team. I don't think they're a heavily flawed team. But the reason why I am not content, personally, you could be content, and we can discuss this. The reason why I'm content with the Phillies roster is because of, not content, I should say, is because of the fact that I have seen why the Phillies lost the World Series in recent years. They lost the World Series because they had the most strikeouts ever in a World Series in 2022. Their offense completely failed in the 2023 National League Championship Series. I have seen an outfield with a Jekyll and Hyde Nick Castellanos, a Brandon Marsh that the organization doesn't trust batting against left-handed pitching, a Johan Rojas that is probably another 2-3 years away from actually being the best version of himself. So you're not even getting the best version of Johan Rojas because he's so young and he's still learning the major league game. And Christian Pache is a waste of a roster spot. I mean, that guy, the fact that Whit Merrifield was released and Pache is still here, to me is a bit of an insult to my intelligence, but I digress. I want to see them add David and Violent. I think that you need one more bat that I feel more comfortable going into the postseason. And I get it. I understand that I don't maybe need the best bat available. You know, Cody Bellinger will be a great option for this team because he can hit left-handed pitching. He doesn't need to be a part-time player. But I understand also the Cubs are a team that is still technically within the wild card shot, and they might not want to trade him. Same thing goes for some of the other players who are available out there. Do those teams want to actually trade those players? And do you have the assets that another team would want to acquire those players? Now, I do agree, another arm is always a valuable piece, right? You never say no to enough bullpen arms. The 2008 Phillies, they added Scott Air. You saw how valuable that ended up being down the stretch. The 2015 Royals, they added multiple arms in that bullpen, and they had the best bullpen in baseball. They won the World Series. Baseball history is full of teams adding a bullpen arm or another, just arm in general. I just don't think it's going to take a lot of assets to get those arms. I think that this trade market is going to come down to Dave Dombrowski having to put his foot down and say, this is what I'm willing to trade, and this is what I'm not willing to trade. Your move. He's basically going to play poker with the rest of the league. He's going to say, I have my hand, I have my chips. What do you have in your hand? And if you don't tell me, I'm willing to go all the way and see what lands on this poker table from the dealer and see if I win or you win. Because Dombrowski has been here and done that so many times that he doesn't need to take unnecessary risks. This isn't the movie Draft Day where Kevin Costner calls the Jags GM, who looks like he's 12 years old, and says, hey, I got an offer you can't refuse, basically, and basically steals his lunch money and makes them both look good in the process. That's the movies. This is the real life. So I understand that other GMs may look at the Phillies organization and say, I don't know if I want those guys. I do agree, David Violin, they are poised to win. This team has something that a lot of teams don't have, which is chemistry. And I think, Dave Dombrowski brought this up about a month ago. He was talking with John Heyman and Joel Sherman on the show podcast. And, he talked about something that is important, which is chemistry. I don't think we always value enough in the world of sports how important the fact that people like to play together. You always are going to like your job more if you enjoy the people you work with, right? And you're going to be incentivized to be more productive, more successful, less stressed, so on and so forth. Dave Dombrowski last month explained this about the importance of chemistry for this Phillies team.
If the right opportunity came up, you do it at any time. But you also have to be careful because you only have so many bullets you can play. And the chemistry of our club is extremely important too, because they're together as a team. So every club can get a little bit better, but you have to make sure that you're weighing all those things and don't do something that you later regret.
So, again, Dombrowski, been there, done that. He doesn't want to compromise the chemistry. I think the chemistry is the reason why this team is poised to win, because they already are playing for and with each other. I think that's half the battle in sports. There's a lot of times we have seen these super teams put together, right? You know, remember Vince Young over a decade ago, the Dream Team, baby. That team only won, 4 games that year for the Eagles? You know, you look at NBA teams, you put all these superstars together, they don't mesh very well, they lose in the postseason. They never win a championship. So I think the poise to win, David and Violet, is less about if the roster is good enough and more about the chemistry of the team. Anonymous texter chimes in, one more text before we hit the break, says, I would trade Andrew Painter, Justin Crawford, Johan Rojas, and Griff McGarry for Rooker and Miller. Who says no? I'll tell you who says no. It's actually the A's. Because I thought that Jim Duquette brought up a very, very interesting point the other day with Mike Gill, explaining why the A's will not trade Miller. Now, this isn't me. This isn't Mike Gill. This isn't random person on ESPN radio or on television. This is a guy who has worked in Major League Baseball and covered the league, explaining that the A's actually cannot trade Mason Miller this year.
If I'm Oakland, he still has his rookie status. If he ends up being Rookie of the Year this year, they get a draft pick, with the new rules that have been changed. We saw the Orioles get a draft pick this year for Gunnar Henderson being a Rookie of the Year last year. Same thing with Arizona for Corbin Carroll. So Oakland is sitting there looking at potentially another. That's a really valuable pick. I don't think Oakland can afford to trade him.
He says Oakland can't afford to trade him. So that's who says no to your deal, is Oakland. Oakland says we value getting that draft pick more than we value you trading us these potential prospects. Okay? That's number one. Number two, I say no because you're giving up too much to get a journeyman slugger and a young pitcher. First of all, Andrew Painter is still coming off of an injury. I don't even think it's smart to trade an injured player. I don't care how valuable he is. I think that you got to wait and see if Andrew Painter becomes a player that people think he can be. You don't trade a guy like that. You keep him. You see how it plays out. Justin Crawford, I think you got to keep as well. Remember, Castellanos has a couple more years left on his contract. Schwarber has a couple more years left on his contract. Crawford might be your starting outfielder in 2 years. You can't move on from him. I'm not trading Rojas and making sure that Marsh and Pache are my center fielders when Marsh had 3 errors in 1 week. Pache hits as well as I do. And then Rojas is really the only valuable player playing center field. So I can't give up that guy. The only guy you named that I would trade is Griff McGarry, because Griff McGarry still hasn't made it to the major leagues. He's this big time prospect who hasn't been able to break through that glass ceiling. And you're just sitting there like, well, he's supposed to be so good. Why isn't he at the major league level? So if you were to tell me I'm going to trade Griff McGarry for somebody, I'm totally on board with that. But I'm not trading all of that for Rooker and Miller, especially when the A's are probably not going to trade Miller. And let someone else overpay for Rooker. Let a team like the Braves or the team like the Minnesota Twins or a team like the Kansas City Royals or the St. Louis Cardinals, let them overpay for a journeyman slugger and let their future be compromised. I'm not compromising my future just for a journeyman slugger who happened to have a couple good games at Citizens Bank Park. Remember, that was with the other team. You have no idea if he's going to be that productive for your team. And again, he's only been good for the A's the last 2 years. Go back through his baseball card or baseball reference or whatever platform you want to use. You'll see that when he played for other teams, he was nowhere this productive. Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Our Phillies talk being brought to you by Clark's Moving and Storage. Moving is a breeze with Clark's Moving and Storage located in Rio Grande. We'll check out the text board a little bit later this hour, 609-403-0973. That's the text board. Your DMs into the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle. Coming up next, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. We'll get into all that and more with him here on 97.3 ESPN.
Is your vehicle stopping like it should? Does it squeal or grind when you brake? Don't miss out on summer brake deals at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Henning filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. We'll get back to text boarding just a bit at 609-403-0973 and your DMs into the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle. But right now, joining me on the phone line, as is every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the Sports Bash, it's Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City here on the Sports Bash. Mike, welcome back in. How you doing today?
Hey, Josh, doing well.
You staying hydrated with the heat and the thunderstorms and the crackles of lightning?
I'll tell you, this weather is ridiculous. You know, the only good thing is you don't have to shovel heat, right? So I'll take this over snow. But 100-degree days, a couple days in a row, boy, that's tough.
And it absolutely is. Mike, but speaking of it, it is the week of the All-Star game. So I got to ask you, you know, I understand, first of all, I'm going to sound like the old man instead of you. I gotta tell you, I hate the uniforms last night. I felt like it was like some futuristic version of baseball they were trying to replicate. I mean, baseball's gotta stop overthinking this. It's baseball. It's not a futuristic showcase.
Yeah, I agree. I don't, obviously, you know, I'm for the guys wearing the uniforms of their regular uniforms. I'm for that, not anything else. So, you know, I agree. The uniforms that they have are ridiculous. And, you know, although I still enjoy the All-Star game, I wish, as Bryce Harper said, that everybody was wearing the uniforms they normally wear.
And the other thing was that drove me nuts is guys were in there for 2 pitches or 2 outs, and they, like, Christopher Sanchez got 2 outs on 2 pitches immediately out of the game. Like, I understand you're trying to manage the win, Mike, but I mean, I felt like it was overkill last night.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, they're trying to get as many guys in, especially as many pitchers as they can in. I bet you if you asked Rob Thompson what he would want for a Christopher Sanchez All-Star appearance, he would have took 2 pitches and 2 outs, right? So, you know, it's walking a balancing line between, you know, how many innings you want the pitchers to go. Obviously, I thought, you know, we would have all liked to see Skeens throw another inning last night, but that's just the way it is in 2024.
Well, the Phillies could probably see him this weekend in Pittsburgh, so they got that going for them, you know.
Right, possibly on Sunday, I guess. So there you go, you know.
Speaking of the Phillies, I made this comment before you came on, Mike. You know, the only team in baseball history with 62 or more wins for the All-Star break that won the World Series was the 2018 Red Sox. So apparently Dave Dombrowski, Mike, is the only guy who knows how to win a bunch of games for the All-Star break and then win a World Series. How confident are you in Dave Dombrowski's ability to pull the right move at the deadline with the Phillies?
Well, I have all the confidence in Dave Dombrowski in the world. The guy is a Hall of Fame executive and a past world champion, as you said, with the Red Sox and with the Marlins. I just think what you talked about deals with the you know, the unpredictability of the baseball playoffs. You know, last year 3 teams won 100 games: Dodgers, Braves, and Baltimore Orioles, and they all lost in the playoffs. The Phillies are going to win 107, 108 games. They're going to have an awful lot of pressure on them when the playoffs begin.
You talk about pressure, Mike. For you, who is under more pressure? Is it the pitching staff or the offense?
Well, I think it's the offense, right? Because, well, let's say this. If I had to rank the pressure, I'd go offense, bullpen, starters. Because, you know, you look at the playoffs, the runs the past 2 years, the starters have more than held up their share of the bargain. Yeah, there's been some tough starts. Noel had a few tough starts, but, you know, think of Wheeler in Game 6 in Houston, you know, 5 innings before they took him out. The starters last year pitched pretty well. But the bullpen and the offense has just not come through when they needed to. So, yeah, if you're going to list the pressure that you're under, it's the batters, followed by the bullpen, followed by the starters.
You mentioned the bullpen, Mike. We obviously saw Strahm and Hoffman get into the All-Star game last night. I always look at the bullpen, Mike, as I don't know if I necessarily need like a Mason Miller, but I feel like they need one more guy because Alvarado and Hoffman have both pitched 42% of the games this year. You don't want to overkill your arms in a regular season and have them be tired for the postseason, right? So to me, I'm not saying I need the best pitcher out there, but I don't know if it needs to be Scott Eyre either, right? It needs to be someone maybe in between a closer and a random left-hander.
Yeah, you need another arm for that bullpen, preferably a right-handed guy. Because, I don't have a lot of faith in Kirkring. He struggled his last couple of outings. Dominguez has struggled all season long. I think lefty-wise, although Alvarado hasn't been great, you're in good shape with Strahm, Soto, and Alvarado. I got to go get another right-hander out of that bullpen, and it has to be a high-leverage guy. I think that's a must-get. And now, if they got the guy from Oakland, boy, that would be outstanding. You slot him into the closer, and you knock everybody down a slot. Boy, you've got some bullpen then. But I think we can all agree they need another right-hander out of that bullpen, and that's one of the big moves I expect them to make in the next 2 weeks.
Talking with Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, joining us here on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. Mike, the other thing is there's a lot of teams that are going to need help at the deadline. Like the Phillies, yeah, they want help, right? The idea that they would like another outfield bat, another bullpen pitcher, but teams like the Mets and the Braves and the Cardinals and the Padres, they're way more desperate, right? So is it something where maybe the Phillies just got to say, let them go out and get people first, and then we'll slide in and get who we want?
Well, I think the Phillies have to be proactive. This team is built to win this year and next year. 62, 63 wins at the All-Star break. This is a team with World Series potential. I think you got to go out and be proactive and do whatever you can to improve the roster in the next 2 weeks. I don't think you can sit back and say we'll react to other people. I think the Phillies have to be the ones going out there and forcing the action. This is a team that is built to win now, and they've got to take advantage of it.
All right, so you're saying for Philadelphia, the idea that Dave Dombrowski just needs to zero in on who he thinks is best and just go get him. Don't let somebody else potentially swoop in and steal him.
Right, absolutely, and we all know what that is. We talked about the bullpen arm. Right-handed bat, right-handed outfielder that can hit with some power, play left field. That's what they need. Closer, another reliever. That's what they need. Dombrowski has got to go out and get those guys. This is a team that is built to win right now. The window is open right now. The Phillies might not have as good a chance as they had this year for a long while. They've got to go out and make sure the roster is as strong as it possibly can be for October.
Mike, I want to flip it over to football because we are counting down the days to training camps reporting, although the Baltimore Ravens rookies reported over the weekend, which is wild to me. But the clips that come out from Hard Knocks last night, and I gotta tell you, Mike, Giant fans, I feel bad for them because it seems like this Joe Shane, he seems like such a wimp, man. I mean, this guy seems just like he got walked all over, didn't know what was going on. He had no idea the Eagles were really interested in Saquon Barkley. He didn't understand the market value of him. Like, this dude, he's looking like the dumbest person on earth. Like, I feel like Hard Knocks has exposed the Giants so much. I don't know what's worse, the fact that the Giants look bad or the fact that I don't think any other NFL team is ever going to want this to happen again.
Well, I don't know. I have a different viewpoint, Josh. I mean, okay. I think the Giants are unfairly criticized a lot of the time, and specifically when it comes to Saquon Barkley, and specifically by people in the Philadelphia media market. I remember when the Giants drafted Saquon Barkley second in the draft, everybody stood up and said, how could the Giants take a running back second in the draft? Nobody takes running backs in the first round. You can get a running back in the fifth round, the sixth round that's just as good. Nobody wastes high picks on running backs anymore. Now you flip forward 4 or 5 years, and people are like, oh, how come the Giants didn't pay the 27-year-old awfully injured running back, a mega amount of deal? I mean, I think the Giants played the situation with Saquon Barkley about as well as they could play. They didn't want to pay him the money that the Eagles gave him. People look at running backs, age 27, how they deteriorate after that age. I just feel like the Giants are being unfairly criticized no matter what they do, is wrong. So I look at it, they lost Saquon Barkley to the Eagles. Is Saquon Barkley going to be worth the price the Eagles paid for him? We'll find out, but history would say no.
All right, so if I play devil's advocate with you, because I hear what you're saying, Mike. I didn't like the fact that Shane told Barkley that he was going to let him go and find his market and then come back to him with the number. I felt like the Giants, they should have come out up front and said, this is the number we're willing to offer you.
Well, I actually like that Shane, again, to disagree with you, that he went out and said to Saquon Barkley, as I watched the scene, he said, look, I don't know what your market is. You go out and get a number, and then you come back to us, and then we'll see if we can meet that number. And I thought his explanation of, we don't want to offer just say $10 million a year and your market be $11 million a year and you get upset and you leave for $1 million. So go out and get what your market is and then bring it back to us and we'll decide whether or not we want to, meet that price or exceed it. That's the way it played out. I think it was, conceivably a decent way to negotiate it. Nobody from the Giants wants to see Saquon Barkley and Kelly Green or Midnight Green or watch him go to an in-division rival. But could it be quite possible that the Eagles overpaid for Saquon Barkley? If you look at that contract compared to other running back contracts that were given out in the offseason, you can make that case. I guess only time will tell.
All right, so I want to put words in your mouth. So you clarify if I'm interpreting what you're saying right, Mike. You feel like Joe Schoen is getting a bad rap based on the footage that has been put on Hard Knocks, that he is being pigeonholed into something that is not realistic.
Well, he's just getting a bad rap from Eagles fans who are right now bragging about the fact that they think they put one over on the Giants by signing Saquon Barkley away from them. And my point is that, the Giants are unfairly criticized by people in the media and especially the Philadelphia media when they first drafted Saquon Barkley, and then that 5 years later they're criticized for not paying him above and beyond what a lot of other running backs got as far as free agents in the off season. So I don't have a problem with the way Joe Schoen handled the negotiations. Did I want the Giants to lose Saquon Barkley? Of course not. Did I want him to sign with the Eagles? Of course not. But that is a lot of money for a 27-year-old running back with an injury history.
Before I let you go, should the Giants be calling about Brandon Ayuk?
It's hard to say because I just spent 20 minutes defending Joe Schoen, and the other thing is watching Hard Knocks, you get the feeling that the Giants don't think they're very good, that they have a lot of holes, and that's one of the reasons why they let Saquon Barkley go is because they didn't want to put that much money to one player, and they wanted to spread it around and try to fix the offensive line and get some weapons. The Giants have, they've got the kid from LSU. We'll see how he works out. But, it couldn't hurt to make a phone call to the 49ers and see if they can make a deal for him.
Well, if nothing else, the Giants got some defense. We know their defense is going to be there. Just the question is, I don't believe in Daniel Jones at all. So I feel bad for Giant fans. It's going to be another year with that guy under center.
Well, we're find out about Daniel Jones, but as I remember, Daniel Jones, I know people like to think it didn't happen, but he has won a road playoff game as an NFL quarterback, and there aren't many NFL quarterbacks who have done that, including the guy who quarterbacks the Philadelphia Eagles. So I realized it was Minnesota. People don't like to count it, but Daniel Jones has won a road playoff game. So, is this a make-or-break year for Daniel Jones? Absolutely. But I don't, again, people who discount him out of hand, I just don't see that.
Didn't TJ Yates also win a playoff game on the road?
Possibly, but Jalen Hurts hasn't. So, it is an accomplishment. It is tough to win playoff games. It's tough to win playoff games on the road. Daniel Jones did that. He came back last year and got hurt very early in the season. He has a history of injury problems. The way the contract is structured, if he doesn't work out this year, they can cut him and go in another direction. Obviously, the Giants have some questions about Daniel Jones because they were very interested in the quarterbacks at the top of the draft, according to the Hard Knocks show. So,
yeah,
we're going to find out about Daniel Jones this season, but I think to dismiss them out of hand would be wrong.
Well, we can agree to disagree, Mike. By the way, TJ Yates actually did win a playoff game for the 2011 Texans, whatever that's worth.
The Shakey's Bowl, the 4:00 game on a Saturday. There you go.
Mike, I appreciate you jumping on. I always enjoy the conversation, and we'll catch up soon, okay?
See you down the road, Josh.
Mike McGarry for the Press of Atlantic City at AC Press McGarry on the Twitter X platform, joining us here on 97.3 ESPN. I got text coming in to get to coming up the other side, 609-403-0973. Your DMs into the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle. Jeff from Ocean City, as well as Elroy from Mays Landing, and Thea. I'll get to all your messages coming up next on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on a Wednesday afternoon.
It's This with Mike Gill.
Do I have everybody's attention now?
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
2:52 on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. Get some of your messages before we hit the top of the hour. So to come, I'm going to play that Hard Knocks audio for you. I got one opinion. There's another opinion. You can decide. I feel like I'm like one of those like news channels. Like, I report, you decide. I don't remember whose slogan that is. I barely watch TV news anymore, but I remember that was somebody's slogan for a while. We report, you decide. Well, I'm stealing that from whatever network that is. So, and we're not even using it for news. We're using it for Hard Knocks reality TV footage of the New York Giants general manager. Over on the text board at 609-403-0973. Thea chimes in and says, I agree the Phillies team chemistry is important, but it's irritating that Stubbs is the team's cheerleader, and that's what keeps them in the major leagues. He and Pache are both automatic outs. I turn the channel when they both come to bat. Well, first of all, I don't know if that's impressive or scary that you are literally changing the channel, Thea, when two players come to bat. I agree with you that I don't like Pache on this team. He is an automatic out, but I understand the whole Stubbs thing. I understand that they look at Stubbs as a guy who he is an important part of that locker room. And if Bryce Harper and Trey Turner and Nick Castellanos and Kyle Schwarber and Alec Bowman, all these guys are happier with him on the team than not, I tend to feel like I want the players to be happy more than me being aesthetically pleased by a hitter at the plate, but that's just me. But I agree with you on Pache 100%. Jeff from Ocean City chimes in and says, I like to see the Phillies grab top seed for home field advantage for the NLCS and the World Series, and hear about how other teams hate to play in Philadelphia. Yeah, teams always seem to hate playing in Philadelphia. We heard last year that they had some of the loudest crowd noises of all time. So that was definitely a big deal last year. Elroy and Mays Landing chimes in and says the Phillies have a culture that fits. As you said, all of those guys like each other. They relate to each other. That's why Jazz Chisholm has no shot of coming here. He'll stick out like a sore thumb. Culture and team makeup matters to players and some fans. Well, Elroy, it sounds like you are one of those some fans that it does matter to. Yeah, if a guy is not going to be part of the culture, not be part of winning for this ball club, I have no interest in him either. That's why I like Kevin Pillar. I think Kevin Pillar is a team-oriented guy. I don't know what George Springer and Cody Bellinger would be on a team like this. That's why I'm not as emphatic to get those kind of players, but we'll see. I see the DM coming in from James. More of your messages coming up, as well as I'll play the audio from Hard Knocks. Giants GM Joe Shane next on 97.3 ESPN.
This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
Josh Hennig filling for Mike Gill on the 3 o'clock hour, being brought to you by Broadlee's Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. Broadlee's is your trusted source for plumbing and heating service and installation for generations. Call them at 609-390-3907 or visit them online at broadlees.net. Let me tell you something. Last night was a perfect night that you want the air conditioner working. because as long as you had electricity, now I'll admit, where I live, we lost electricity for like 5 seconds. But let me tell you something. Having the air conditioner running on a humid, disgusting night like last night was so clutch. So for me, I say you need to call up Broadleys if your AC is not keeping you cool this summer. 609-390-3907. And again, online at broadleys.net. Bring you the 3 o'clock hour here on the Sports Bash. As promised, I'll get back to you more of your texts and your messages. 609-403-0973. Your DMs into the 973 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle. I got a message from James I want to get to in a little bit, but as I wanted to get to this audio. So for those who may be a little confused what's going on because you're used to so many years. I mean, I believe it was 2003 when the first Hard Knocks came out. The reality TV show / real-time documentary of NFL teams in training camp. And it's grown over the years to being an in-season show. Well, now they're doing the off-season for the New York Giants. And so the Hard Knocks NFL Films cameras follow the New York Giants around this off-season. And it has generated some great conversation audio for all of us in the media. So the episode came out last night where we found out about what actually happened when the Giants were unable to bring Saquon Barkley back. Now, as we know, Saquon Barkley left the Eagles. Now, Saquon says that part of the reason why he left the Giants was because, he wanted to be used as an offensive weapon, not just a running back. He said that he wanted to be paid his value. He was comfortable with the Eagles organization. He wanted to go to a winner, et cetera, et cetera. So, in Saquon's words, he doesn't describe it as the Giants were horrible, I hate them, and that's why I left. But I do find the audio from Hard Knocks interesting. So for those who didn't hear it, let's first hear the conversation back and forth. This is Joe Schoen, the Giants general manager, and John Mara, the co-owner of the Giants. So it is the equivalent for the Eagle fans. Jeffrey Lurie is the owner. Howie Roseman is the executive VP of football operations / general manager. So it's that same relationship. It's the owner and the general manager having a meeting talking about Saquon. And I think this audio is part of the reason why, for me, why I feel bad for Giant fans out there.
What's the latest? Just on the Saquon thing.
I just got a text that Chicago's driving the price up and Philly's out. I don't know if that's true or not. Which I don't know. I'll make a couple of calls. I don't even know if that's gonna happen, but
I have a tough time sleeping if Saquon goes to Philadelphia. I'll tell you that. As I've told you, just being out. I had been around enough players, so but he's the most popular player we have by far.
So there's a huge problem I have with this audio. First of all, whether it's true or not, it makes both men sound very weak. Okay. You have two guys who are not assertive. They're in positions of power. You have the owner of a football team who's a billionaire, and you have a guy who runs the $1 billion operation, and they're both being like, I don't know what's going on. I think the Eagles are not interested. And the owner being like, I really hope we don't lose him. He's our best player. I've been around. If he's so valuable to you, if he's such an important player to you, if he is someone that you're worried about going to your rival in the division, why are you letting him have the opportunity to walk away? It would be like if someone, let's say a couple is dating for years, right? And, the guy turns to his girlfriend and says, I want to get married, but I want to get married on conditions. And the conditions are you're going to go out there and see if there's anybody better out there. And if I can match what they can bring to the table, then I'm going to give you an engagement ring. Like, no, that's not how it works. You want to be with someone. You want someone on your team, your organization, in a relationship, whatever it is in life. You go out and put that out there. You don't beat around the bush and be like, oh, I don't know. Because remember, this is the same Giants general manager who said this the week before to Saquon Barkley on the phone?
I think just mulling over this, the right thing to do is let you test the market and see what your value is. I don't want to do the franchise thing or all that stuff again. I don't want to go through that. We've both been through that. You know, if you really want to be a Giant for life and you're interested in staying here and coming back, just see what your market is and then have Ed come back to us and we'll see if we can come to an agreement.
All right, I appreciate that.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
That doesn't line up for me. How do you go from the owner of the team saying, we really don't want to lose him, and the GM saying, I really hope he doesn't go to the Eagles, I don't think they're interested in him, but then also say, you know what, why don't you just go out and see what's out there? I don't get that. I mean, have you ever had a salesperson come to you and say, let's see, it's a restaurant. We make the best burgers in this town, but we're not going to actually give you our burger. We're going to tell you to go find that burger somewhere else and then come back and let us know how the other burgers are. And we're going to match what those other places do. You'd be like, that's not, what? What are we doing here? So I don't understand how this organization, the Giants, say they want to keep Barkley, but then they went and told him the week before, well, go out there and test the market and figure out what's out there. It makes no sense to me. Then the other audio that we have here from Hard Knocks last night, which I understand a lot of you probably didn't watch, didn't even know it was on because the All-Star game was on. And if you weren't watching the All-Star game, you were probably binge watching something on Netflix or you're actually having a life, right? You know, most of us are not seeing these episodes in real time anymore. That's why there's Hulu, for goodness sake. We watch TV the next day. But Joe Schoen has a conversation with Saquon Barkley's agent. Now, I will preface this by saying I did shorten this audio so you didn't have to suffer through the huge gaps in the conversation because they only had the audio of Joe Schoen's side of the conversation. So this was Hard Knocks last night. Joe Schoen, when he finds out the Giants are not going to be able to keep Saquon Barkley from his agent. This is Joe Schoen, the Giants general manager, on the phone with Saquon Barkley's agent.
Good day for you. Good day to be Ed Berry. Oh, what's my man gonna get? North of what you said?
12.5 APY, 25 guaranteed.
North of that? Again, we're not gonna go there. We're out. Is it in the division? I'm trying to prepare myself mentally for what's going to happen. I mean, that's all.
First of all, why are you preparing yourself mentally for something that you've already put into motion? Didn't Joe Schoen tell Saquon Barkley, go out in the market and find out what your value is and come back and tell us what it is? Didn't Joe Schoen say, hey, we don't want to go through the franchise tag again. We're going to go through this process and we're letting you know. Joe Schoen put this in motion. So why does he have to mentally prepare himself for the possibility that Barkley might not come back or he might go to a division rival? What are you mentally preparing yourself for? I don't understand this man's mentality. And this is why I disagree with Mike McGarry in the last hour. Here on the Sports Bash, Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN. Text board is open at 609-403-0973. Also, your DMs into the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, which is free. Thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. I don't understand what this guy needs to mentally prepare himself for when he is the one who set all of these things in motion in the first place. Because remember, again, what was the conversation he had on the phone with Saquon Barkley the week before? Let's remind you, part 2 of Giants GM Joe Schoen's conversation with Saquon Barkley the very week before the agent told him this discovery that they're not going to keep the guy in the first place.
Can you give me your word on that, or you're not going to give us a chance?
What do you mean? I'm just talking about that?
Yeah.
I mean, I already told you that where I want to be, so.
Okay. All right, well, let's do that. We'll go out and see what the market says. I think it's the right thing to do. I love you, man. I appreciate everything you did for the organization. The 2 years I was here, and I'm not saying we're not going to get something done, but I think it's right if for some reason it doesn't work out that you know that the organization thinks the world of you and everything you've done. But hopefully, you go out there, you see the market, and you say, you know what, I want to be here, and you give us a shout back.
I appreciate you.
I don't know what's worse. He gives the eulogy before the guy actually is gone, or the fact that he says, can you give me your word that you're going to come back and tell us? And Saquon's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you mean like, you want me to tell you? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, well, you already know where I want to be. Saquon's telling him, I want to be here, but you're the one who is giving me the opportunity to leave. Again, it's like a relationship. I want to marry you, but I'm not sure if you want to find someone else better out there. And then the other person says, yeah, but I want you. And then you turn around and say, oh, no, I want you too. But if it doesn't work out, it's been an amazing couple of years of us together. Like, how would you feel if you're Saquon Barkley in that situation? In life, it doesn't matter if you're an athlete, you're in a relationship, a friendship, a job, anything in life. We all want to feel wanted. The fundamentals of human emotion. One of them is we want to be wanted. We want to be welcomed. We want to be appreciated. At no point in this whole thing between Joe Schoen and Barkley and how they handled the situation, did Barkley ever feel like he was wanted, appreciated, maybe appreciated because they gave him a lot of flowery stuff. But actions speak louder than words. Because there's probably a part of Barkley that says, well, if you like me so much, why don't you just give me a contract right now and then stay here? Now, again, maybe I'm misreading this. You guys can let me know. 609-403-0973. But it goes back to what Michael Lombardi, former NFL general manager, said on the GM Shuffle podcast about the difference between the Eagles and the Giants, because Lombardi also thinks the Giants are basically a bunch of wimps. This is what Lombardi said on his podcast.
They don't have a compass. When you have a philosophy, you have a compass. This is who we are. We're devoted to offensive and defensive linemen. We're going to draft them. The Eagles have a compass. They've added an auxiliary piece into Saquon Barkley, but they fit him in. But their compass is we're going to put money in offensive and defensive linemen. That's who they are. They have no linebackers. I mean, they don't give a shit. That's who they are. But there's nobody that's telling me who the Giants are. You're nothing. You don't have an identity.
That's the key. What do you want to call it? Identity, conviction, I don't know, self-belief, the ability to just go out there and say what you want. I don't know what the correct term is, but it's all to me the same. It's the idea that if you are an NFL team and you have a player like Saquon Barkley, who you drafted with the number 2 overall pick, and you're telling him you value him, then why wouldn't you do everything to keep him? You can't have it both ways. I mean, the guy, like I said, sounds like a wimp. Well, will you give me your word? I need to mentally prepare myself. I don't know what's really going on with the Eagles. I mean, literally in the show, they had no idea the Eagles were interested in Barkley. I mean, that is a complete mismanagement of where you're getting your information from. That would be like a news organization reporting that, like, a fire happened at the wrong house. Like, there was a fire today in Atlantic City, and then they give, like, the wrong address. And then the video is of the right place, but they give the wrong location on the actual, like, news report. Like, how do you let that happen? I just don't get it. Cole from LBI chimes in at 609-403-0973. Says, as a Jets fan, I am neutral here. If anything, I'd root for the Giants over the Eagles. But if I was a Giants fan, I would be so peeved at my GM is either an idiot or lacks conviction. Just have a press release in February and say thank you to Saquon and move on. That's from Cole and LBI. Cole hit around the head. if the Giants were already going to go down this road, just remove the formality. Just go be done with it. I mean, we see this in sports all the time. A team says, look, we can't afford to keep a player. Like the Clippers, they had a whole like post on Twitter that was, we appreciate Paul George for his time here. We know he's going to move on, blah, blah, blah. Why didn't the Giants do that? Cole is right. It's a lack of conviction or he's an idiot. And I just have trouble projecting onto someone that I don't know personally and call them an idiot. I feel like that's too simplistic to do. But I do think he lacks conviction. I think that is 100% fair to say about this guy. It is 100% fair to say that the general manager of the New York Giants is a man who lacks conviction, he lacks assertiveness, and he doesn't know how to say what he wants. We'll ask Rob Motley from the Associated Press more about this coming up next here on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig filling for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN FM and 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea City.
You're listening with Mike Gill.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. I can't see him, but he talks to me.
On 97.3 ESPN.
3 o'clock hour of the Sports Bash being brought to you by Broadleys Plumbing and Heating and Air Conditioning. Broadleys is your trusted source for heating and plumbing service and installation for generations. Call them at 609-390-3907 or visit them online at broadleys.net. As promised, as we are counting down the days to the Eagles reporting at training camp, less than a week away, Rob Motley from the Associated Press joins me right now here on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on a Hump Day Wednesday edition on 97.3 ESPN. Rob, my friend, appreciate you jumping in. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. How are you, Josh?
I'm doing pretty good. So before you came on, I was talking about, this whole situation with, the Giants GM. Basically, whether you want to say he lacks conviction, whether you want to call him a wimp, whether you want to call him passive aggressive or whatever you want to do, this Hard Knocks is making this guy look really bad, Rob. And I don't want to call him an idiot because I don't know Joe Schoen personally, but the dude definitely sounds like somebody who just was not, he didn't understand what he was walking into. Like, he literally is telling Saquon Barkley, well, will you promise me that you'll come back and let us match it? He's talking about how he doesn't want him to go to the Eagles, but then he says, well, tells the agent, can you mentally prepare me for where he's going to go? This is not a good look for this guy.
Absolutely not. Can you mentally prepare me? What are we talking about here? You got to get ready to lose your girlfriend in 7th grade?
This is what I was saying. Thank you.
I don't get it, Josh. And then there's a little bit of intrigue too, because there's a conversation with Saquon's agent, Ed Berry, where he says that there's some numbers, the $25 million guarantee, 12.5 per year. But is that before the negotiating window? I know that the Eagles were exonerated and I know that the Bears were involved, but the Eagles were involved. So there's some interest here as far as when you were talking to the agent and who he spoke to, and it's just a conversation that the NFL needs to have. But to your point about Joe Schoen, it just seems really odd to me. And I know that these shows can put you in a really awkward kind of position, and there's a full conversation that's had, Josh, and I know a little bit about how reality TV works and how parts are used and some parts aren't, and actually a little bit is used and so much is taken out and edited out. Yet for how it's presented and how we hear it, he certainly looks unprepared and like a guy who is completely taken by surprise and not ready to be in that position that he's in. And hey, they haven't done well. So is he on a hot seat yet? He ought to be after this.
You mentioned the reality TV show. If I could just pick your mind on that a little bit, Rob. When you think about what we're seeing with Hard Knocks, Do you think NFL teams are going to be like, I don't want to be like Joe Schoen ever again. I'm not going to let somebody else, do, chopping up, video footage and audio and piecing things together to make me look like Joe Schoen. Because as you said, Rob, you know how this process goes. They probably film 200 hours of footage and they only use an hour of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think teams have been reluctant, right, Josh, in the past and still will be. But ultimately, I believe that the NFL has a lot of input in this. And then it also comes down to having thick skin and understanding that in the NFL spotlight, you're getting criticism regardless. You're getting criticism all day long, all week long from fans, from media. So is few minutes in looking completely like a fool on a Hard Knocks going to really tip the scales? For some, I think it will, but for others, they're just going to play along. And, I know the Jets, right, last year, they certainly weren't all that excited about being featured on Hard Knocks, and they made that perfectly clear. And what happened? They were featured on Hard Knocks. So maybe you tell them, you get a little bit of creative control, but really, how much time do you have as a head coach, as an organization, to be then looking at, do you look at the final copy before? Do you have someone, do you assign that to someone in the organization? Hey, just make sure whatever's going to go out there, whatever's going to be presented, we don't look like complete idiots. Maybe part of that is worked into the language, but I think that's what this is all about. It's like a behind the scenes, taking a look at things that are happening. Now, I know that part of reality TV is presenting things as if they're happening in that moment when they're actually not. And it's, that was really good. Can you do it again? Can you say that again? Can you say it again? Now, can we get the camera here? And can you make that motion what you did? So you take something that happens in real time that's raw and unfiltered, but maybe the camera angle didn't capture it quite the way they wanted. So now it becomes do it over and do it over again and do it over again. So I've been down that road. I know what it's like. I don't know how accommodating GMs, head coaches, and players are going to be to redo scenes like that. But I'm sure there are so many aspects of that are, hey, this is that was really good. Can you say it this way? Maybe add a little bit here. All right. And they want to get it over with, and they do it.
Rob Maaddi from the Associated Press joining me here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig filling for Mike Gill on a Wednesday afternoon. Just to tap a little more into the reality TV show part, because I honestly, Rob, I completely forgot about you did the reality TV show at one point. If you had advice for NFL teams who might be walking into, whether it is a Hard Knocks, like the Bears are this season, right? Or whether it is like one of those like Amazon or Netflix documentaries, like, is there something that you think that the NFL teams or the average person has no idea about when it comes to these reality shows that they need to know?
Yeah, be careful what you say, because cameras are everywhere and they're recording everything. So I could say my wife and I were always, except in the bathroom. So my wife and I would have conversations in the bathroom that we didn't want recorded and that we didn't want on camera. We also have the luxury of speaking a different language, and we would speak in a different language to each other. And then sometimes they complained about that and wanted to bring in an interpreter to see what we were saying. But you do have to be careful, because they're everywhere. They're everywhere, and they're looking for those little moments that can be viral videos, that can be viral sound bites, that can really go off and make the show pop. So I will tell you just one quick little funny story. So as far as how it's not really real and it's kind of scripted, and there was a scene that I shot that involved me throwing a chair that had to break a glass table. Well, and for as strong as I may look or seem, I could not do that. Every time I threw that stinking chair, it would bounce near the glass table. It didn't, like, we shot it 6 times, and I just would throw the chair, because it had to be from like 15 feet away. So I'm throwing the chair, and it's not breaking this expensive glass table in a mansion in Beverly Hills. Finally, they said, we'll just pan away and make glass breaking sound. And they piped in the glass breaking sound, and I didn't actually break the glass table. And I was like, well, maybe you should have done that from the first shot and saved that glass table from even breaking and then the mess and cleaning it up. So it's that kind of little nonsensical things that people think are like, oh my gosh, that really happened. No, it didn't. We set that up 6-7 times.
It sounds like somebody should have called like professional wrestling or like WWE or something to help you out, you know?
Right? Tables, ladders, and chairs matches, man.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if I would have fallen properly through one of those. You had to bring in Mick Foley.
That's a good pull by you, Mick Foley. Good job, Rob Bonney, joining us here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Rob, well, flip it over to the team that got Saquon, right? That being the Eagles. I have used the analogy about Saquon that, to me, I feel like him coming to Philadelphia is similar to when Marshall Faulk got traded from the Colts to the Rams, where on the Colts he was on a very not good team. Then he went to a team where he was one of the orchestra. He was not all of the orchestra. You know, so can Saquon be to Philadelphia what a Marshall Faulk was to the greatest show on turf?
Man, that is a lot of pressure, Josh, to put it like Marshall Faulk went to the greatest show on turf and became a Hall of Fame player, right? Had a good career and then became the Hall of Fame, a dual threat, 1,000-yard receiving, 1,000-yard rushing guy. I certainly hope Saquon Barkley doesn't become DeMarco Murray in Philadelphia, like when the Eagles brought him in after he had a monster season with the Cowboys. I hope he's a lot closer to Marshall Faulk than he was DeMarco. And I think without putting him in that same category of Hall of Famer, I do, and I think he is a tremendous addition and has that kind of ability and talent to elevate his game in Philly with all of, as you're saying, with all of those pieces around him, Jalen Hurts and Dallas Goedert and obviously A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And we know the offensive line, despite losing Jason Kelce, is still a top-notch elite offensive line. I think he can be closer to that. I don't know that he can help the Eagles become the greatest show on turf like the Rams were those 2, 3, 4 seasons with Kurt Warner and Isaac Bruce, and wasn't Torrey Holt in that mix?
Torrey Holt,
and
yep.
Marshall. Yeah, so that's something to strive for, man, and those are high expectations. If you put those on Saquon, I don't think he would say I think he would agree with you that that's something that he can do and he wants to do and he wants to achieve. But the Eagles they're going to spread the ball around. They're going to run the football. Jalen's going to get some carries. I'm eager and interested to see how he gets them because we talked about this last week, the Kellen Moore offense, more under center than shotgun, and what's that going to look like. But I do have high expectations for Saquon. I don't know if they're Hall of Fame Marshall Faulk caliber, but I do think that he can still take his game. He's got something left. He's not going to be DeMarco, and I think he's going to take his game to another level.
Speaking of Jalen Hurts, Rob, this week that ESPN Plus survey of NFL executives, coaches, and scouts had Hurts not at the top 10 quarterback anymore. But Rob, they blamed everyone but Hurts. They talked about how Sirianni didn't put him in position to be successful. The coaching wasn't great. They talked about how, if Jalen has a really good year, he's a top 10 quarterback again. And it feels like we're putting Hurts in a different grading scale than everybody else because under that premise, the Eagles have a much better roster than the Bills do. Why is Josh Allen a highly rated quarterback when he's basically throwing to who? Keon Coleman, Mac Hollins, and Chase Claypool this year. Hurts has got a way better supporting cast. So why are people still grading Hurts so lowly?
That's a great question because we, the AP, are going to put out our top 5 lists next week, and it's probably a week late. Probably should have done it, but in grading out and ranking the quarterbacks, and I'm looking at it's a panel of us, 9 of us, and I'm still getting everyone else from my my colleagues' rankings back. I have not seen Jalen in the top 5 on anyone else's except mine. I got him at 4, and I put him ahead of 2-time MVP Lamar Jackson because for me, I factor in your playoff effectiveness too as well. Okay. And I know Jalen has taken the Eagles to the Super Bowl and had a great game -1 play in the Super Bowl. I think Jalen gets a lot of negative criticism that's unwarranted at times. And we saw that last year when people were but people were expecting, Josh, for him to have a drop-off season, right? And ultimately he did. He didn't have the same kind of numbers. He turned the ball over more frequently than he did in his runner-up MVP season. But I still think that Jalen Hurts, with the weapons that he has, is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I ranked him like this. I went, obviously, you got to go Patrick Mahomes 1, and then I put Josh Allen 2, Joe Burrow 3, Jalen 4, Lamar 5. And you can make an argument for other guys and Dak and Justin Herbert, and there's so many players in that like 4 to 10 tier that I think you could argue. I think the top 3 should be in however you want to go, Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, or Mahomes, Allen, Burrow. But from 4 to 10, I think they're all in that. And to me, Jalen's in that mix. And then to not have him in the top 10, I think it's unfair and really isn't. It's kind of saying that you're giving other guys credit when they perform well because of players around them. But Jalen gets too much of he's only doing it because he's got other players around him. Well, he's still got to get the job done. And he did 2 years ago, and he did for the most part last year, helping them get to a 10-1 start. It's not Jalen Hurts' fault entirely that this team collapsed at the end of last season. There were a lot of pieces to it, and taking him out of your top 10 as a quarterback when last year going into the season, people had him top 2 or 3, and all of a sudden now he's out of top 10. Now you're blaming him entirely for the collapse last year, and I don't think that's fair.
Well, it's like I always say, Rob, like, I can't blame Hurts for the Eagles defense allowing 35 points to the Cardinals last year. Like, I can't blame Justin Herbert when they were playing the Jags 2 years ago in the postseason and his defense allowed that huge comeback. Like, I never understood why we blame the quarterback for things that are out of their control. Like for example, remember, 2019 when Carson Wentz had the band of misfit toys and Deontay Burnett and all those guys, Josh Perkins. And remember that year the Eagles, they led the NFL in drops per target and all these stats they put out there. And it was like, well, it's not Wentz's fault, right? And they got to the playoffs. So it's like, I never understood this mentality of, hey, let's blame the quarterback for something he has nothing to do with.
Yeah, that was, and it's funny you mentioned that season. I was somewhere on Twitter, somebody was showing highlights of one of the games, and I'm like, man, that was Carson at his best. Like, what happened? It was 2019, and yeah, guys like, I don't even remember. I can't name you the receivers.
I can name them.
Perkins came out of nowhere.
Deontay Burnett, Greg Ward, he was on that team.
But who was the guy? Travis Fulgham?
Fulgham.
Who was the,
Travis Fulgham.
Who had like 3 great games.
Yes.
Remember?
3 games.
He might have been 2020.
No, he was. No, he wasn't 20. He was 2019, I think. I think they tried to bring him back in 2020. I think that's what it was.
That was the year where he threw for over 4,000 yards without a 1,000-yard a wide receiver with 1,000.
Correct.
No more than 500. Like, I don't think a wide receiver had 500. Nelly was hurt. Alshon was hurt. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside was on that. Was there a Robert Davis or something Davis on that team? But, yeah, man.
These horrible names.
Good times. I remember there was a beautiful touchdown pass to Josh Perkins in the Meadowlands, like across to clinch the division. That might have been one of the plays that I was looking at. Somebody was pulling those out there, kind of like to tease the old time Wentz fans in Philly.
By the way, yeah, you're right. Travis Fulgham was 2020, not 2019. 2019. I mentioned Deontay Burnett. I mentioned Greg Ward. That was the first year of Boston Scott, by the way. You had
Giant Killer, yeah. That's when he became a giant killer. Who else was the receiving core?
J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. You had him.
Yeah.
Josh Perkins. I forgot that Jordan Howard was playing running back that year. He had 6 rushing touchdowns. Good for him.
Yeah.
Man, this list is bad. I mean, Jordan Matthews, the return.
But then he got cut again.
He got cut again. Yeah. Deshaun Jackson.
Deshaun lasted like a game or two.
Yes.
Right? He barely played. 3 games. Yeah. Was there a Davis? There had to be a Davis. Some point on that, there was a guy.
Robert Davis. Yes.
Robert Davis. That's why I think I said that a few minutes ago. Robert Davis. He had like 1 big catch in one of the games.
Yeah, he started 2 games.
He ended up, that's how bad, like he started. He was a starter for 2 games. Guys off the scrap heap, man. Wow. What a year. That's a masterful coaching year by Dougie P, too. To win that, it came down to Birds and Cowboys at the Link late December for the division, and they won that. That was the Zach Ertz, I think, got hit in the kidney shot and wanted to come back in the game, made a big-time play. That was that Cowboy. That was that win over Dak and the Cowboys.
By the way, can we get an AP investigative report into why the Jags-Eagles game is on Sunday Night Football and not Monday Night Football? I mean, you missed a beautiful opportunity for Jason Kelsey to interview Doug Peterson ahead of Monday Night Football.
Oh, man, that's a great one. That's a great question. That's in November. I'm going to be there for that one. I have an event with Tony Dungy in the Philly area the next night. So I'm actually glad it's on Sunday so we can accommodate because Tony will be
You're
there.
So selfish, Rob. Stop being selfish.
Forget, hey, you know why Jason can interview Doug Peterson a different day. It's all about my stinking schedule right now. But are the Jags on Monday Night Football at 8 point? You would think they got to be on Monday Night Football.
They are, but I just felt like Jags-Eagles. You know what I mean? Like that's
that makes Yeah, that's a great point. So I don't even know what Jason's role is going to be. He's going to be in studio.
So he's going to be so you know how they go on location, SVP and all those guys.
Yeah.
He's going to be part of the countdown unit.
Ah, okay. That Steve Young, Randy Moss crew, those guys. I think for Jason Kelsey.
Yeah. I think it's Marcus Spears, Jason Kelsey, and I forget who the third guy is. I got to look it up again.
Alex Smith's still on that crew? Alex Smith?
I know Alex Smith's around. I don't know if he's on that crew or just the Sunday crew. But
RG3 was on that crew, I thought.
He's off. I know RG's off.
Oh, okay. Maybe Kelsey took his.
Yeah. RG3 has that podcast like everybody else does. And he explained on his podcast that basically ESPN has kind of like reassigned him to do more college football than NFL stuff.
Which he does very well. He does do very well.
Oh, he does. He does a very good job. He's probably underrated at the college football, honestly, than anything else. But
yeah.
Rob, really quick before I let you go, I did mention earlier I wanted to ask you about Brandon Ayuk. I mean, this whole thing is getting ridiculous. First, they can't come to an agreement, right? Then it's the 49ers were asked by Ayuk's representation to trade him since they couldn't come to an agreement. Now the 49ers are reportedly coming out and saying, we're not going to trade him. So like, what is going on here? Like, is John Lynch just playing, hardball? Is there something that's I'm missing here? Because I feel like, Rob, if the 49ers wanted to keep him, they would have gotten a deal done by now. Or am I missing something?
A couple of years ago, Josh, Debo he also came out, Debo Samuel, in I think as early as April said that he wanted to be traded, and the 49ers and Debo didn't get a deal done till late July. So I kind of feel like this is the 49ers saying, hey, we still got some time. We've been down this road. We've been down this road with a superstar wide receiver only 2 years ago, and we did get it done. So and his representation is at the point where, hey, they're trying to put some pressure on. All right, we want to get traded. We want the ability to talk to other teams. This way, the 49ers, they're playing hardball. Ultimately, I don't think the 49ers, if they want to, and they certainly should want to, and I know they do, be contenders for a Super Bowl this year, like every team, you're in a position where you're better with Ayuk now than you are with the draft picks you're going to get for him. So you want to compete for that Super Bowl this year, and you were close to it you were right there at overtime. You got to find a way to get this deal done. I know they drafted Ricky Pearsall. He's also on the non-injury inactive list right now. I don't know what happened. what happened there. So they're setting themselves up for potentially replacing him, but it's going to be – he's thrived under Brock Purdy. I think the numbers are like 8 100-yard receiving games and 26 starts with Purdy, 300-yard receiving games and 45 games started with Jimmy and all the other quarterbacks, Trey Lance and anyone else in San Fran. So I think it's just a matter of both sides trying to dig in, be difficult with each other, play as tough as they can. Ayuk wants as much as he can get because we've seen wide receiver contracts go crazy this offseason. Justin Jefferson setting a new standard, everyone getting a new deal. But the 49ers understand that patience eventually wins out. Despite Ayuk flirting openly with the Commanders and his buddy Jaden Daniels or whatever he wants to put on Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat or whatever it is, whatever. I sound like Bill Belichick here.
Yeah, you do.
I think ultimately he still ends up with the San Francisco 49ers. By the way, I'm excited about Belichick doing, what is it, inside the NFL? I can't wait for him to say on to the next topic.
Yeah, exactly. Can you imagine Ryan Clark's trying to advance the conversation and Belichick's going to be like, yeah, I'm done with this topic. Like, because you got to remember that panel is what? It's Ryan Clark, Belichick, I think it's Chris Long.
Long, who, he played for him.
Yeah, so like, and I love Chris Long. I listen to his podcast every week.
And Ocho Cinco, right?
It's Ocho? Okay. I was trying to remember who the fourth guy was, but like, I could totally see Chris have a look on his face like, I'm trying not to derail this show. He has a look on his face every week, and then he'll go on his podcast and be like, let me talk about what I didn't get to on Inside the NFL, So it's like, there's one of these weeks, Ryan Clark and Belichick are talking, and Belichick's like, I'm moving on. And Chris Long comes on his podcast next day and be like, let me tell you about this conversation off the cameras, right?
Oh, that'll happen. Now, Belichick has been really good. Like when he did the NFL top 100, right, of all time, when he was in that studio, like he can really talk. Like if he's interested and he's got something to say, he can be very, very captivating and obviously extremely knowledgeable. So I think he will do good in those. I'm interested to see also the Manning cast with Bill, like, because I still feel like awkward. Peyton just dominates and Eli doesn't say. Now you're trying to bring in Belichick and you want him. He's there for his insights, but is Peyton going to talk too much over him? So that's going to be interesting to watch.
Although I will say my favorite Belichick non-coaching was him and Saban. That sit down they had together. I thought that was like, I walked out of that like hour or 90 minutes or whatever it was they had together. I felt like I was smarter because I listened to them just bounce back and forth like a ping pong, basically.
I got to go back and watch that. Now you gave me something to do.
Yeah, well, I'm here to help you out, Rob.
It's on the homework list. It's an assignment.
that in you still have to watch the Netflix. Did you ever watch the Netflix Quarterback last year?
No. Every time I sit down and do that, like the family steals the TV, and I get relegated to the tablet, man.
Well, what you got to do is
the last night with no baseball for like another 4 months, so I'm really excited about that. At least I'm going to have the baseball back tomorrow.
Well, what you got to do is you got to tell your wife, hey, this is a football version of reality TV. Why don't we sit down and rip this show apart together? Because we used to be on reality TV together. You got to put an angle on it.
There we go. I know Kirk Cousins was in that first year, and Kirk's a nice, fine, young Christian man. I'll tell her, right? Well, I'm not all that young in the NFL terms. He's 35, but hey, look, let's see how he parents his children and everything else. There we go. I like that, Josh. Good stuff.
At Rob Maaddi on Twitter X. Of course, he is the Associated Press senior NFL writer, and joining me here on the Sports Bash, Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. Rob, great stuff today. I always appreciate you jumping on. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Josh. Keep up the great work, my man.
Appreciate it. Rob Maaddi joining me here on 97.3 ESPN. Well, check out the text board coming up on the other side, 609-403-0973. And still to come in about 10 minutes from now, Jeff Mosher, Eagles insider from the Insider Birds podcast, joins us for Football at 4 here on 97.3 ESPN.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance engineer, he hears things differently. To the untrained ear, everything on his shop floor might sound fine, but he can hear gears grinding or a belt slipping. So he steps in to fix the problem at hand before it gets out of hand. And he knows Grainger's got the right product he needs to get the job done, which is music to his ears. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Mike Gill.
And I am the voice of the voiceless.
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
All right, as promised, I want to squeeze in a couple texts before we hit the break. 609-403-0973. A couple messages coming in. David from Violence says, Giants didn't want to pay out the money to be losers. Rich people are greedy. Well, I don't know if it's that they didn't want to pay out because they're losers. I think that they want to pay out because they don't value the running back. I think it's a little different. Thea chimed in earlier, says she agrees with me about Phillies acquiring Kevin Pillar. Well, thank you, Thea. I appreciate you agreeing with me. You don't have to agree with me, by the way, but I do think it's an interesting point. Texter Anonymous chimed in, says the Giants GM is egotistical, out of touch idiot. He thinks the Giants organization is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and no one will ever leave. Well, it's funny you said that, Texter, because the Giants used to be one of the elite franchises in football. I mean, that was an organization that has a pedigree of championships and success. And, you know, George Young and Bill Parcells running the organization, and then Tom Coughlin won 2 Super Bowls. Parcells won 2 Super Bowls. Jim Fossil got there 1 year. And then you go back to like the 50s and 60s when they had some legendary players back then too. So the organization does have a massive pedigree, but the problem is the current version of the organization has lost its way. You know, as Michael Lombardi said, they lack a compass, they lack direction, they're rudderless, they have no clear guide moving forward. So it does make you wonder about the organization a little bit. That, you know, they should be an organization that you wouldn't want to leave. They should be an organization that has a certain level of respectability. But the problem is, you're right. The Giants GM is out of touch. And it's like the Giants, they don't have self-awareness to understand where they are right now is not who they used to be. It's like the person who says, I want to drive a BMW. And it's like, well, yeah, BMW was a cool car to drive in like 2000. Like, cool people don't drive BMWs anymore. People who are hanging on to the past typically drive BMWs. Like, the cool luxury car now is like Audi, for example, right? Audi's like the hot brand, not BMWs. I feel like that's what the Giants are. The Giants are hanging on to an old model and think they're still cool. Jeff Mosher, Eagles Insider, next on 97.3 ESPN.
97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
Just hungry to bring back another Lombardi to Philly. It's the fans deserve it. Our team deserves it. Culture begs for it.
Now live, this is Football at 4.
Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Yes, Football at 4 is here. We continue the football conversation as we're counting down the days to Eagles training camp. And Jeff Mosher joins us as does each Wednesday here on 97.3 ESPN. Jeff, welcome in. How you doing, my friend?
I'm great, Josh. It is just so hot that I'm happy to be inside in an air conditioning room, just like yourself, talking to you. And this could be a great interview if you promise not to ask me if insert Eagle here is a top 5 player at his position.
Well, I wasn't going to ask you that. So
Good. What the great day continues.
Is it okay if I ask you about the Hard Knocks last night?
Only if you want to talk to somebody who didn't watch it.
Well, I didn't watch it either, but I saw the online clips. You know, I just don't understand, Jeff, how this Giants organization seemed to have no clue. This is now 3 straight episodes where they had no clue the Eagles were interested. Like, how, and then he's telling the agent last night, he's saying to him, well, can you tell me who it is? Who's giving, is it, like, he's begging for information from the agent. And it's like, dude, like, you're the one who told him to go check out the market. And now you're surprised that he's leaving. Like, I don't understand. Like, Jeff, I get it. I know why Saquon left, because Saquon was like, this team in the Eagles wants me and knows how to use me. And the Giants are like, we would like you back. Like, it's just such a contrast.
Yeah, and I wonder a lot about, Josh, how Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, right, had to sort of navigate what appears to me to be the concept of once they didn't come to a long-term agreement with him the year before, right, and he played on that final year, it appeared to me that they had moved on from him for the future. But as you saw in Hard Knocks, and even me not seeing it can't avoid all of the memes and the Twitter clips or X clips of the owner really wanting to be, involved and know what's going on with Saquon Barkley, and even insinuating that if Saquon Barkley left for the Eagles, he would just melt, right? But I don't think that bothers Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll as much as it bothered the owner. But the owner, as we even know here in Philadelphia, is the guy that you're ultimately trying to win over and convince to keep your job. So I think that was a difficult navigation. I honestly don't think – I think if you shot Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll with True Serum, they would tell you they're not that upset that Saquon Barkley's not a Giant. I'm not saying that they don't think he was a good weapon, but I think for what they want to do, what they want to become, for all the injuries that they had to deal with Saquon there, I'm a little bit surprised that their best backup plan was Devin Singletary. I mean, we know that was Brian Daboll's guy from Buffalo, but that surprises me. But I don't think that they want to be that invested in a position that eventually, when they get to where they want to be, if they get the chance to get there, they're probably not going to be running the ball or having a running back touch the ball 18 to 25 times. So I think that was a difficult navigation for them between what they want to do and what the owner wanted.
So with that being said, Jeff, when you look at Saquon now with the Eagles, what is a realistic expectation? Not the fans who want to place a bet or the fantasy football people out there. I mean, what is a legitimate, your perspective on everything you know about this coaching staff and Saquon and how this might play out?
Yeah, Josh, it's a great question. Not 100% sure. Obviously when you pay him that kind of money, you want a guy who's going to give you, I don't want to come up with a number, but yeah, they probably want something like 1,600 combined yards and, whether that's 1,200 rushing, 400 receiving, right? And double-digit touchdowns. But I don't even want to put it into stats for them. I think they want an impact player. They obviously want an impact player, and they're paying for an impact player at that position. 2 years ago, Kellen Moore had Tony Pollard, who was sort of splitting time with Ezekiel Elliott, but he obviously had a ton of carries, made the Pro Bowl. He had 1,378 yards that year combined, 12 touchdowns. And that was on a low price, right? Because that was like year 3 of his rookie deal. So is that a reasonable expectation? I don't know how you can expect all that production and also expect 1,400 yards again out of A.J. Brown, 1,200 yards out of Devontae Smith, and 1,000 out of Dallas Goedert. So the expectation is the Eagles had a lot of money. They went out and used that money to make their offense as well-rounded as possible. And I think that the Eagles themselves don't even want to put a number on it. They just want it all to work well and be harmonious with an explosive run game and an explosive pass game.
Which leads me into the latest edition of the Inside the Birds podcast. You and Adam talked about who the coaching staff is. And I think it's important that people look at Kellen Moore and probably just look at him as the former Cowboys offensive coordinator. But his influences are way beyond the Cowboys specifically because he has Scott Linehan in his lineage. And Linehan comes from Mike Martz, and Mike Martz ran the greatest show on turf. Now, I'm not saying the Eagles will be the greatest show at the Link, but what I'm wondering from you, Jeff, is there for you any connectivity down that line?
Oh, there's a lot of connectivity, Josh. I'm glad you brought that up. This is one of my favorite podcast series that we do, where we take a really in-depth examination into the coaching staffs. And tomorrow we'll do the defensive one that will come out with Vic Fangio and his staff. But we don't just talk about what their schemes are. I mean, I don't want to say it's been beaten to death. We've done that. But we also talk about their influences, what their expectations is, how they've adapted, what the metrics say they do. And as far as influences, yes, Scott Linehan not only was an influence and is an influence on the offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, but in 3 different places, he's also worked with quarterback Doug Nussmeier, quarterback's coach Doug Nussmeier, who, by the way, was a quarterback at Idaho when Scott Linehan was the head coach there. So they have that's a lot. There's a lot of symmetry there. As you mentioned, he was always known, Scott Linehan, as an attack style offensive coordinator. Unfortunately for him, when he became the Rams head coach after Mike Martz years later, he did not inherit Kurt Warner and Marshall Faulk and all those guys. He wound up with Mark Bolger and Steven Jackson, but he still produced, I think, a top 10 offense in his first year as the Rams head coach, and Steven Jackson did flourish underneath him. So that's Scott Linehan. So fast forward to his influences here, or who he's influenced, being Nussmeier and Scott and Kellen Moore. What you would expect, you're going to see spread offense, attack offense, mismatches. We've seen motion involved in the offense before. Now, here's a really fascinating thing that we have found out, and Greg Cosell even mentioned it too. Greg knew this from his interactions also with the Eagles, is that Jeff Stoutland, who is the run game coordinator, not the biggest fan of motion. And here you have an offensive coordinator who has been given, autonomy, full autonomy all offense, who is normally incorporated motion into the offense. So it'll be interesting, Josh, to see how that works out when such a renowned coach like Jeff Stoutland, who's been here for a while, doesn't love motion, but the offensive coordinator who's responsible for making this offense work does like motion.
Talking with Jeff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com, and subscribe to Inside the Birds as well on YouTube at Jeff P. Mosher on Twitter X. You mentioned about Stoutland. That's a fascinating question I want to follow up with you because, you can run motion, but maybe not as much to offend the other guy, right? There usually, at least from my understanding, I was listening to Nick Saban talk about this the other day, and I know Stoutland is from Alabama at one point, so that's why I'm thinking of it. Saban talked about how, you have to balance everybody's interests as a coach, and you have to understand that, because remember, Saban had that period where he had a different offensive coordinator every single year, it seemed
Correct.
And Saban talked about how, you gotta understand that, just because Steve Sarkisian likes this, but maybe you don't have a quarterback who's good at that, or you maybe have a running back coach whose expertise is one type of running back, but maybe you can't recruit that guy. So Saban talked about how you gotta make all the pieces fit, and sometimes you gotta do a little bit of compromising. So I'm assuming that maybe there might be a little compromising then between Stoutland and Kellen Moore here.
Yeah, and I love the example you're bringing up in Nick Saban because it's really pertinent to the Eagles, because Jeff Stoutland worked for Nick Saban before Chip Kelly brought him to Philadelphia. And back then, Josh, when Nick Saban was the coach and Jeff Stoutland was the offensive coordinator, Alabama's offense was not what it eventually has become. Alabama's offense was way more pro style. Like you said, less motion. It was based on the running back more, the running game. Trent Richardson, who's the other guy? Yeldon? Was he an Alabama running back?
TJ Yeldon. Yes, he was.
Yeah. Derrick Henry, right? They had these big...
Bo Scarborough.
Yes. And to your point, the offensive coordinators back then fell in line with that. And it wasn't really until Lane Kiffin got to Alabama and butted heads at times with Nick. And so credit Nick Saban for bringing in a guy who thought differently. And Lane said, look, we got to get with the times. We got to run more spread. We got to open it up. And lo and behold, Alabama went from the running game to all of a sudden flourishing in the pass game. And then look what that did for Alabama. Julio Jones and Jerry Jeudy and all the Amari Cooper, right? All the great wide receivers that have Devontae Smith have come out of Alabama lately is a direct result of the fact that Nick Saban compromised and started throwing the ball. All right, now he didn't deviate. He wasn't like air raid. He's not, rest in peace, Mike Leach, but he was willing to see a different side and the benefits of a different way of doing it offensively. And that's what you have to hope here happens between Kellen Moore and Jeff Stoutland. They do seem to be like two guys who are not egomaniacs. I think that's important. I don't know them very well, but I've talked to Jeff Stoutland a lot. I don't think he doesn't strike me as an egomaniac. And you can, of course, incorporate more motion in your passing game, which Jeff Stoutland is not in charge of, as opposed to the running game where maybe you don't need it. The Eagles aren't a wide zone type of team anyway. They're more of an inside zone. And I think if Kellen Moore is smart he's going to keep that up with how big their offensive line is. Just pound it up the middle, run duo, run inside zone. You don't have to worry about guys running orbit motion and jet motion and shifting and moving tight ends. You're just going to pound the rock up the middle because that's where the Eagles have done most of their damage in the running game. So, yes, I don't think that it takes a whole lot of compromise here to make this work.
And sticking with the offensive line, we know that Lane Johnson had the best run block ratio in all the NFL last year. Not just tackles, all offensive linemen. So I'm assuming that we're not going to just see 5 wide spreads and crazy stuff, because Kellen Moore did have a top 10 rushing offense in Dallas 3 or 4 years. So, I'm assuming that we are going to still see a little smash mouth going on here in Philadelphia. It's not just going to be, throwing the ball deep every down.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there have been times over the last 2 to 3 years where the Eagles have really flexed their muscle. You think about the Saints when they had the number 1 run defense and number 1 overall defense. They came into the link, and the Eagles, this was like 2 years ago, right? Super Bowl year, or maybe even before that. The Eagles ran all over them.
Yeah.
The Jacksonville game where it was pouring and the Eagles just decided to run. The Minnesota game, not last year, but the year before, or no, maybe it was last year. I get them all mixed up now, where Brian Flores went with the light box and the Eagles just ran up the middle. I guess that was 2 years ago, right? Or no, last year, right? So there are absolutely times where I'm sure Kellen Moore will say, all right, this team is trying to stop our passing weapons. They're playing a lot of 2 deep zones, a lot of quarters coverage, a lot of defensive backs are back. So let's get the ball to Saquon Barkley, and that's where all that money comes in, right? And you just hope Saquon Barkley stays healthy and can operate behind. Obviously, you should be able to operate behind this really good offensive line.
Yeah, and before I let you go, Jeff, I was doing a little research because if you compare Hurts and Dak Prescott, for example, Prescott has thrown the ball 269 more times in his last 50 starts than Jalen Hurts. Yeah. But the Eagles have a offensive line that can run the ball. So it would be dumb if you tell Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata and Landon Dickerson, you guys are really good at run blocking, but we're not going to run the ball so we can have Jalen throw the ball more. Like, it only makes sense to say, let's run the ball to offset what we're doing, because we know the Eagles want to pass. We know that's what Jeffrey Lurie loves, right, Jeff? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, sometimes if you look around, you're like, oh, they're daring us, so we got Saquon. You don't.
Yeah, you can look at that. I mean, I also think that, Dallas throws the ball more. They have a great offensive line, too. They have had a great offensive line throughout the years, and a lot of Pro Bowlers. But, Dak Prescott, the reason why he's thrown the ball a lot more is because he's a good thrower of the football, despite what a lot of Eagles fans might want to say about Dak Prescott. He's if he's not, he may not be top 3, but he's in that top 5, 6, 7 names of guys who can really hurt you through the air. And so they've wanted to throw the football because they have Dak Prescott.
Jeff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com. Like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. The next pod drops tomorrow, right, Jeff?
It does. That'll be the defensive examination of the defensive coaching staff. Totally different if you think about it, because when we talk about coordinators, whether it's Kellen Moore, whether it was last year when we were doing Jonathan Gannon or Shane Steichen 2 years ago, right, or when we were doing Sean Desai, we always talk about who's influenced them and why they do what they do. Well, when we talk about Vic Fangio and a lot of the disciples on our staff, he is the influencer, right? Like, there's his 2 influences who we'll talk about on the podcast. They're not in coaching anymore, and they haven't been coaching for quite a while. And, oh, by the way, Vic Fangio changed his own concepts about 5 or 6, 7 years ago to do something different than even he was doing, say, when he was with the 49ers with Harbaugh and went to the Super Bowl. He has adapted for a reason that we get into on the podcast. So you'll have to check it out.
I'm looking forward to that pod. Again, Inside the Birds podcast dropping tomorrow morning. Great stuff today, Jeff.
All right, Josh. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
And make sure you follow Jeff on Twitter at Jeff P. Mosher. Inside the Birds podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. Let's follow up a couple points that Jeff made there. First of all, really quick on the Fangio point, before we get back to text board at 609-403-0973 and your DMs into the 973 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle. Jeff mentioned about Fangio, how Fangio has adapted his defense multiple times. And it goes to show you that, there's that old saying that, wise men know when to change course, whereas stubborn men are the ones that get left behind. And so Fangio, being an individual that's willing to evolve and adapt and say, hey, the league is doing this, now I have to counter that. It goes to show you the positive about having a coordinator like that, because last year the Eagles, Matt Patricia was a stick in the mud. He does certain things, does what he does a certain way. Sean Desai, same deal. And both of those guys doomed the Eagles defense last year. They both were stubborn. I want to do it a certain way. I don't have flexibility. And was all destroyed the Eagles. So it's such a refreshing message from Mosher that Fangio is a guy who says, hey, I used to do this. It doesn't work anymore. Now I'm going to do this. So that's the first big takeaway from what Jeff said. The other part of what he said is that he talked about how you have these coaches on the offensive side of the ball who all come from an incredible group of lineages. You know, Jeff Stoutland coached under Nick Saban. You had Kellen Moore working with guys like Scott Linehan in the past. Doug Nussmeier as well, Scott Linehan. It really goes to show you how important it is, the resume, the person you're hiring, and not just hiring the person who had the home run interview. Because we've seen too many times in football, well, not just football, but other sports as well. But the idea that a football coach or any coach, they may not be the best interview, but they may be the best person for the job. It's like, I don't care if you are the best at a press conference or you are the greatest grammatics, or are you good at your job? Can you do your job effectively? And so what you're doing now is you are hiring people who know the dynamics of, hey, this is how we used to do it. This is how we can do it. And this is how we evolve past what we have done to get better. And I think that the Eagles coaching staff, having coaches like Fangio and Kellen Moore and others who have shown the ability to evolve, to adjust, to progress, I think it's a big part of the conversation that coming into this year, for all the people who are worried about how are the Eagles going to be better than last year, how are they going to avoid the collapse they had last year, how are they, whatever question you may have, I'll tell you how, because the people who were here last year, who were part of the problem, are no longer here. Now you have people who are no longer part of the problem, who no longer are going to put this team in a position to not be successful. And I think that is one of the great positives of a team like the Eagles coming into this year. And in an NFC where, let's be realistic, if the Eagles are one of the, how do I put this? If they're one of the best teams in the NFC, right? Aside from the 49ers, and let's say the Packers and the Lions, okay? Who else is their competition? Because the Cowboys got worse this offseason. They lost multiple stars on the offensive line, and they did a poor job at replacing those players. The Commanders, they'll be better than last year, but I don't think they're going to be like 10 wins better. I think they're probably more like 7-win team. Giants are not going to be competitive, so you can just wipe them off the plate. In the NFC South, only one team is coming out of that division, and it's not the Panthers. And I don't know who it is. Is it the Falcons? Is it the Bucks? Is it the Saints? You don't look at the NFC South as a major competitor. I mentioned the Lions and the Packers in the North, and we'll see what the Vikings and Bears turn out to be. I'm not overly confident in those teams, but I don't think they're going to be horrible. And then the NFC West, outside the 49ers, who's the other team? Is it the Rams? Are we looking at the Rams as a contender? Do the Cardinals take a step forward? There's a lot of what ifs out there. So outside of three teams, Philadelphia is the most complete roster who is not those other three teams. And you could make the argument that there are parts of the Eagles roster that are better than the Packers or that are better than the Lions. So if the Eagles are among the best rosters in the NFL and having talent matters in football, then what reason do we have for the Eagles to not be good this year? Unless you're the person that believes that the Eagles are a mentally deficient bunch, which I don't think that's true at all. All right, Josh Henning filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle. Coming up next, Knicks Nuggets. Nick Earnshaw joins me for his daily segment. I got a bone to pick with Earnshaw because I thought the question he asked for today's question of the day on the update is a bad question. Now I'm going to confirm about it next on 97.3 ESPN.
It's this Mike Gill.
And I am the voice of the voiceless.
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Josh Henning filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN. It's time for Knicks Nuggets. Nick Earnshaw joins the show every day during the week on 97.3 ESPN, as well as being a producer for Billy Schwein in the locker room every weekend here on 97.3 ESPN. And Nick joins me here on the show. Nick, welcome in. I know you heard what I had to say about you before the break, so I'm glad you still, you weren't afraid to face the music. How you doing, my friend?
What's going on, Josh? Oh, I heard you all right. I heard you right before the break. I don't see a problem with the question. I think it's a great
dumb
question. It's a fair one to ask.
No, it's not.
One to ask.
Why? So you're telling me, let me ask you, you're telling me that you're just going to throw out everything Kelsey said on his podcast, everything his wife has said, everything his brother has said, everything Jeff Stoutland has said, all because Lane Johnson said one specific comment to Kay Adams.
They could say and talk all they want. You can't tell me it hasn't crossed his mind to come back. If he's hanging out more than the players, working out in the facilities, more than certain players, Lane Johnson said he's been there more than him. He's been around the building. Like, he still is.
Because he has nothing else better to do.
Mindset.
What else does he have to do?
Exactly. He has nothing else better to do. You can't tell me it's not crossed his mind that, no, maybe I could come back.
Yeah, well, you know, a lot of things cross all of our minds. Doesn't mean that we're going to do it.
I'm just saying. That's why I said I don't think he comes back, but you can't tell me it's not crossed his mind. Maybe I come back. You know, I don't have anything else to do. You know, I'm going to do this ESPN Monday Night Football thing. Might do some TV. I got the podcast, but I still kind of like football and I can still play at a high level. I don't know. I mean, you can't tell me it hasn't crossed his mind at least once or twice, maybe 3 times.
Yeah, but he said himself that he lacks the drive and desire to do it anymore.
I know, but remember, we watched the greatest quarterback of all time do it a couple years ago, and after a couple months, he was back and you played one more season.
You really think Kelsey is going to put on another 60 pounds all out overnight? You know the guy's lost like 50, 60 pounds.
I know. I'm just saying. He's around the building. Now, coaching, I could see. Coaching probably is more of the way he would go. That's a little different. But playing, you can't tell me it hasn't crossed his mind. You cannot say that. He has not had that thought of, maybe I should come back. Maybe I do come back. Maybe, you know, this Eagles team is looking pretty good. They got a new running back. You know, they got new coordinators. Maybe I go and give it one more shot here. I'm just saying. I don't think he does. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying he has definitely had that thought cross his mind if he's hanging out at the facility all day. You can't tell. You're human. You have plenty of thoughts going through your mind all day. That's something that's definitely going through his head. It has to. By the way, that was nugget number 1. This is nugget number 1, just to say the least.
So I would say it's crossed his mind in the same way that I have watched like a UFC fight and I realize I'm probably better than the guy who's fighting because he's so horrible at moving in distance. He has poor cardio, and I'm sitting at home thinking, yeah, my cardio is better than that guy. That's what Jason is like. Jason doesn't really think he can play, but he probably watches whoever the Eagles backup, Brett Toth, I think is the Eagles backup center right now. He's like, yeah, I'm better than Brett Toth. That guy can't snap like I can. You know, like that's what he thinks. He's not thinking like literally like, yeah, man, I'm going to play again. Like I think that you took Lane's comments way. You took it from point A to point B and skipped the midpoint line.
I don't think I skipped the midpoint line. I'm just saying, like, I think it's something that, you know, in human nature, you got to think about it. I mean, you're there every day. It's a routine for you. You love it so much, you go back to it. I don't know. We've seen it happen before. It's not like it's anything new. We've seen legends retire and then say, you know what? I kind of want to do this thing again. Let's give it one more try here. There's no way if he's going to the facility all of the time and he's working out, he's there more than other players, that it hasn't occurred to him, maybe I could do one more year. I mean, it wouldn't hurt anybody. Like, I'm just saying, I don't think it'll happen, but it's definitely been something that he's thought about in the old noggin there, Josh.
Yeah, we all think things in our noggins that are not going to happen, okay? Come on.
I think it's definitely something that to watch and that should be taken into consideration in case anything happens down the line. You never know. But I think more on the coaching side, I could see him being a coach. And Lane Johnson kind of alluded to that a little bit in that interview. A coach could definitely be into the realm of possibility for Jason Kelce. If he wants to be around the team, he wants to be around the facility, working out, being in the midst of it with these guys. Yeah, I could see him definitely being like a coach of some kind at some point with the Eagles. It would just make sense. He's got too much football knowledge. He's got a lot to give to the game. I think that would be definitely something he would do going forward into the future. Maybe not come back, but I'm just saying that probably has crossed his mind. But coaching, I could 100% see that, and Lane even mentioned it in that interview.
Yeah, my theory with that is I agree with that. I think that the progression of his career is going to be he's going to do the ESPN thing for a couple years, however long his contract is. I forget exactly how long the contract is. But I think eventually, now this is just my projecting, okay? I think he replaces Jeff Stoutland one day. I think he will be the future O-line coach of the Eagles, and he'll have a long career with Philadelphia like Stoutland did. Because I agree with you. I think there's a part of him that loves football. He loves imparting wisdom. When you listen to him break down footage and tape and stuff, like Wink Martindale, he was on with Michael Lombardi's podcast, and he said that Jason Kelce is the smartest man he's ever met in football. And he said that what made Jason Kelce so dangerous, he says that Jason Kelce is the only center that knew what he was doing, Wink Martindale, before he did it. So that's a guy who was a coordinator in the league saying, look, this guy's brain is up there. That guy's, his studying habits are elite. And you got to have those traits to be an effective coach in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think Jason has those type of traits, right? Like he's got high football IQ. He's around the game. He loves being around the team. Like this is something I could see him definitely doing down the line. And I would say let's get the listeners in on 609-430-0973. I mean, what do you think? I mean, Jason Kelce, possible coach, possible comeback. Who knows? I mean, Josh, this is something, it's not something that shouldn't go unnoticed. If he's doing all this stuff in the facility, he's there so much. I mean, eventually they're just gonna be like, Jason, you want to help out? Like, you want to coach? You want to do something? I mean, that's just kind of how it works. If he's just kind of showing up every day. So, something's going to come out of this, whether it's him coming back, probably not. Coaching, yes. Something along those lines, being in the midst of it, being a part of the game and what goes into each week. Yes, Jason Kelce, I feel like still has that itch to be around it in a different capacity. That's probably the more likely scenario here.
All right, so Knicks Nuggets, what's nugget number 2?
All right, nugget number 2. I mean, we got to talk about the All-Star game last night. I mean, the Phils, listen, the NL lost, like usual. It was the 10th out of the 11th year or game in a row that they've lost. I think they won, a year or two ago, the NL, but the AL got the win.
I don't even care who wins. I really don't.
I know. I still like the All-Star game. I like to nerd out about the All-Star game. It still gives me something here, Josh. But the Phillies, they were fantastic last night. Bohm, Turner, Harper, who all started for the Titans in the NL's lineup, they each had a hit in last night's game. The pitching staff, all of the pitchers got an appearance in the game. It was Christopher Sanchez, Matt Strahm, Jeff Hoffman. 6 out of 6, all the Phillies had an opportunity to be in the game. No runs given up by the pitchers as well. So everyone had a hit, and the pitchers got out of there unscathed, not giving up a run. And I think that was pretty cool to see all the Philadelphia Phillies do extremely well on the national stage at the All-Star game. Any takeaways from last night by you, Josh?
Yeah, number 1, the uniforms are horrible.
Yes, thank you.
Like the uniforms, they look like. So I couldn't decide if they were the baseball team from the next Tron movie that Disney is in production of, or if those uniforms are what we would see, like, you know, like those like cartoons or those TV shows where like they have like a fake baseball team or a fake football team and they're trying so hard to look like another football team. Like that's like the Gotham City like baseball team or something. Like that's what it looked like. They were so bad. Baseball has taken this way too far. Whoever's idea is to make those uniforms should be fired immediately, and they should hire somebody who actually likes baseball. If they're ever going to do that again, they should go back to the regular uniforms like Bryce Harper said earlier this week. And I hope Ron Manfred is serious. I really do. That's my first takeaway. My second takeaway is, why did Christopher Sanchez only pitch to 2 batters? Like you could have put him out there for one more batter. Like the dude faces lefties and righties all the time. Like I felt bad for Sanchez. Dude, what if Sanchez went 3 pitches and 3 outs? That'd be baseball history. You could have seen it, but no, you had to take him out of the game early. It was just so dumb to me.
It's because they want to try and get as many people into the game as possible.
Cry me a river.
I'm just saying. I'm just telling you why. I'm going inside the brain here, Josh. Like that's why they're doing it.
You can be good cop. I'll be bad cop. Okay.
No, that's why they're doing it. They're trying to get everybody in. It's an exhibition game. There's no World Series factor into this anymore. So there's no home field advantage for the AL or NL. That doesn't mean anything. That they need to bring back. And Mike and I have talked about that. Like that needs to come back. I am so with that coming back because it adds more intrigue to the game and it makes it actually matter. So I'm with you there. Now, as far as the uniforms go, they were an atrocity. They were terrible, a disgrace. I don't know who would ever buy that in general. Like they should make zero money. They should give all the money back to everyone who bought something along those AL and NL jerseys. They were brutal. And you know, Mike and I have talked about this. Just bring back the old school way. Have everyone in their own team's uniform. It looks much cooler. It's much better. You recognize who is on the field. That needs to come back.
That's the key.
You recognize who it is. You're trying to market these young players. I totally agree with that. Totally agree. Bring back the way it was and having everyone in their own team's uniform. It's much more cooler.
By the way, totally off the normal sports radio topic. Josh Hennick affiliated for Mike Gill on the Sports Bash. Mike Gill is completely guiltless in what I bring up here, okay? I want to put that out there because I'm going to bring up and ask somebody about something that Mike Gill would never talk about. So for the audience who's going to criticize me for bringing this up, you have your disclaimer. You've been warned, okay? This
609-403-0973.
Exactly. Am I the only person who noticed that Paul Skeens had an acne breakout, and then as soon as his girlfriend shows up, his face got better?
I didn't even notice that.
Like the dude had like a high school face for like a few days there from his last start to Monday. All of a sudden, he's on the red carpet with Livy, and all of a sudden his skin got better. Like, honey, leave him the skin cream so he doesn't have to go on national TV looking like he had a bad shaving day. Leave the skincare routine with him. Don't just bring it when you show up. She's got to help him out there.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying about that, but I will say, Paul Skeens, great mustache. Guy's got a great mustache.
I didn't complain about the mustache.
But the mustache, you can't tell me the mustache he's got a good mustache.
I didn't complain about the mustache. I'm just saying that I'm watching him on ESPN on Monday doing interviews. Mm-hmm. He's doing the circuit, and I felt bad for the guy. I'm like, you're on national TV. This is one of your first big national exposures, and you look like you had a bad skin allergic reaction from shaving, then all of a sudden Livy shows up. They're on the red carpet and his face had a 24-hour transformation.
Well, listen, I'm sure she's going to get it figured out. He'll get it figured out at some point, and it'll all be all right. Who cares? He's throwing gas. He's the best pitcher in the game right now in my estimation. I mean, who's better than him? He's been unbelievable, Josh. Like, he'll get it figured out. He'll look pretty again. Is that what you want? You leaving him look pretty again? He's got to get the nice skincare routine, like the Josh Henning routine.
Listen. I remember when I was younger, my skincare routine was not good in my teenage years, and I looked like Paul Skeens, okay? And then once I figured it out,
So you're trying to help him out.
I'm just trying to help the guy out. You know, okay. I'm just saying, if his girl shows up and she's got the formula, just leave the container with him or whatever, or leave him instructions. Yeah. You know, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, because he's traveling all the time. She's traveling all the time. Yeah. She's going back to LSU, by the way, for her 5th year being on the gymnastics.
I need the betting odds for her to get back to the Sweet 16 next year in the all around. I need that.
It fascinates me, your knowledge of gymnastics. It fascinates me. I couldn't tell you one thing about gymnastics. You know the history, where it came from, who's the best player, who's the GOAT. I mean, it's insane. And I give you credit. I mean, that's a skill right there. That is some knowledge from Josh Henning on gymnastics.
The men's gymnastics team has not medaled since 2008.
Of course you know that.
I'm just putting it out there. I need the men's team to medal this year. I need them to strive for the gold. Don't just let the women keep doing all the work for them.
Listen, you're educating the audience, all right? You're educating the audience. That's what you need to do here, and you're doing a great job.
Or I'm boring the audience. It could be either one.
All right. I got to move on. Nugget number 3, final nugget here for you, Josh. It's still related to the All-Star game. It's another pet peeve I have in general with baseball broadcasts in the past couple of years.
Okay.
They mic'd up Alec Boehm, Trey Turner, and Bryce Harper last night. I'm so out. I just can't. I can't get past it anymore. They got to stop miking up the players during games. It doesn't add anything to me, to the broadcast. It just really doesn't. Guys are breathing heavy. I don't want to hear it. They're calling out different,
They're breathing heavy.
Yeah, I don't want to hear it. It's
folks,
stupid.
Really quick. That's how you know Nick is a real radio guy. Because only real radio guys get mad when they hear random breathing in the background. Like
you hear the whole jersey and like everything's when they're running, you hear everything. It just doesn't add anything. I just want to see the game. Okay.
Like for example,
broadcasters see the game.
Yeah. Like for example, one of the elements that we do is like, we have to sneeze or cough or burp. Like we turn off our mic and then we take care of our business. We turn the mic on, or it's the idea that you don't want to hear this all the time.
How many people just turn the dial?
but that's what you're referring to. That lack of awareness that you are literally just doing like heavy breathing exercises into a microphone. You're right. It's so bad. Although it was funny, Alec Boehm running into the post.
Yeah, you guys running into the post, crashing into things. The mic sounds terrible. Breathing, running. Stop. Just stop interviewing players during the game. I've had enough of it. Everyone does it. All the national broadcasts do it. Just let them play. Let them focus. And we saw an error. Something happened a couple weeks ago. I can't remember who it was, where they missed the ball because they were talking to a player. Just stop. After that, it should have been over. It should have been over after that. If it's going to affect the game, get it out. And as a viewer, I don't want to see it either. It adds nothing. It literally adds nothing.
I wouldn't mind if it's in the dugout. Like if you're telling me a guy is in the dugout and it's like, he's not up to bat, or, maybe a pitcher who's like in between outings or something. I don't mind getting the player's perspective, but you're right.
Sure.
During the course of the action, it's too much.
3-2 pitch, runner on second base. We're talking to this guy about what his favorite food is. I just stop. Just stop. We don't need to do that anymore. I'm done. But all right, nugget number 3. That's my final nugget for you today, Josh. A fun one. And listen, we came together on the last one. We started off disagreeing. We came together. We semi-agreed on the last one.
So I have a nugget for you.
Oh, whoa. Yeah, throwing a bonus nugget at me.
Yeah. So I don't know how much of the Hard Knocks you saw last night, because I know you're a baseball guy first and foremost.
Yeah, I didn't catch it last night.
But I wanted to play for you. So this is the audio. Joe Schoen finding out from Saquon's agent that he's not coming back and they're not going to be able to afford him, okay? I want the Nick Earnshaw reaction. Now, I will preface by that I did edit it to get rid of the dead periods in the audio where you can't hear the agent talking. Or the breathing, right? Here's Joe Schoen, the Giants GM from Hard Knocks last night.
Good day for you. Good day to be Ed Berry. Oh, what's my man gonna get? North of what you said?
12.5 APY, 25 guaranteed.
North of that? Again, we're not gonna go there. We're out. Is it in the division?
I'm trying to prepare myself mentally for what's going to happen.
I mean, that's all.
Your Nick Earnshaw's reaction to Joe Schoen when he finds out that Saquon ain't coming back.
That is fantastic. I love seeing the failure of the New York Giants. It just makes me happy. The best part was him asking, is it in the division? Because he knew it was the Philadelphia Eagles and Howie Roseman.
But that's the problem.
Saquon.
Nick, the show is documented that almost every episode that they didn't know the Eagles were interested. Like every episode, the first episode, they were like, well, the Eagles aren't interested. Second episode was, well, I know the Eagles aren't offering him a contract. And now all of a sudden, he's worrying about the Eagles. Like the dude lacked the awareness, or he's getting bad intel. I don't know what it is, but I mean, it's just amazing.
Josh, I'll add this, to have that out there now on record, like seeing your actual reaction. I mean, Giants fans can't be too happy about that.
No. Well, I mentioned earlier, Nick, like, he lacks conviction. He lacks, it's like he treated Saquon like, I would like to have you here, but why don't you go out and see what's out there and then come back and tell me.
He carried that franchise for how many years? He was the only thing they've had. Like, they haven't had really a quarterback. No. He's been the best player on that team for years now. And he didn't even have an offensive line. Now he's an offensive line with the Philadelphia Eagles that's pretty competent. So, the way they treated him and just kind of let him, he's just kind of another player. That kind of attitude, good thing it's not Howie Roseman's attitude. That's for sure if you're an Eagles fan.
No, Howie Roseman goes out and gets what he wants. Apparently Joe Schoen doesn't. I feel bad for whoever Joe Schoen dates. Like, can you imagine being his wife or girlfriend? Hey, I would like to take you on a date, but why don't you go find somebody else who might give you a better offer and come back and tell me?
Yeah, listen, you don't want him running your organization. He's up in New York now, so that eliminates another team in the division you really got to worry about.
Yeah. Well, that was my nugget for you. So.
All right, I love that. That's a good nugget.
Nick Earnshaw at @Earnshaw Radio on Twitter X. He'll be back tomorrow with more nuggets here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Great stuff, Nick.
All right, Josh. I'll talk to you, man.
Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN. Still to come, we have more football talk. Andy McNamara will join us coming up at 5:20 tonight. Plus, we'll get back to your guys' thoughts and comments on the text board. I have plenty of texts I still have to get to. 609-403-0973 and your DMs into the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank. See how Eagles NFL talk plus Phillies coming out of the All-Star break. That is all on the docket throughout the show today. Josh Hennig, all 4 hours filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget the Sports Bash being brought to you by the boxing event of the summer, Boxing Insider Promotions. Friday, July 26th, the return of undefeated junior middleweight Justin Figueroa from Atlantic City. Get your tickets now at Ticketmaster.com for Friday, July 26th at Tropicana in Atlantic City.
This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
5 o'clock hour of the Sports Bash, Hump Day Wednesday. Josh Hennig filling for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. Still to come about 20 minutes from now, Andy McNamara. He is the host of the Sick Podcast, Fantasy Football Insider. We'll get in his thoughts on the football season as we are counting down the days to Eagles training camp. Thanks again to earlier in the show, Mike Gary, Rob Motti, Jeff Busher, and Nick Earnshaw for all joining me today throughout the show. We'll get back to text board in just a bit. Big Alan Violin, as well as your DMs on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank. See how James chiming in on the DMs. We'll get to him as well coming up this hour. We've been talking about throughout the show. Phillies coming out of the All-Star break. What do they need to do? What is the state of this team? Also, we're counting down the Eagles training camp, reacting to last night's Hard Knocks. It's been a busy afternoon here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you on a Hump Day Wednesday. And I want to just kind of do like a recap of everything we've touched on in the past 3 hours. If you're just joining us, whether you're listening on 97.3 ESPN FM or you have us clicked on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, which is free thanks to First Bank of Seattle. So we started the show reacting to where the Phillies are at the All-Star break. And one of the conversation points we were having in the first hour of the show was the Philadelphia Phillies are the 10th team in baseball history to have 62 or more wins at the All-Star break. And one of the points I brought up is that only one team who has had this many wins or more at the All-Star break has ever won a World Series. And that was the 2018 Red Sox. And what the 2018 Red Sox have in common with the current Phillies team is Dave Dombrowski. Dave Dombrowski was the man in charge of both baseball organizations at those points in time. 2018 Red Sox, Phillies now. And so my question for everyone out there listening on 97.3 ESPN is, knowing that Dave Dombrowski is the only man to crack the code, the only man who's ever been able to find a way to say, this is how we win, right? This is how you win in the regular season and in the postseason. Because you know who didn't do it? The 1970 Reds, the 74 Dodgers, the 2018 Yankees, the 2001 Mariners, the 1969 Orioles. None of them were able to win a World Series after winning 62 or more games before the MLB All-Star break. But Dave Dombrowski did in 2018. And one of the ways he did it was he knew his team needed one more bat. And he didn't acquire the biggest name on the market. He didn't go out and bring in another superstar, right? He brought in Steven Pearce. And on the surface, people are like, who the heck is Steven Pearce? Why do I care about Steven Pearce? Steven Pearce went on to be World Series MVP because Dave Dombrowski went out there and targeted a player that he knew his team needed, maybe not a star player, but a player his team needed. So does knowing that Dave Dombrowski have that kind of success give you more confidence in the Phillies' ability to get over the hump this year? Knowing that they do need one more offensive bat. They need one more player, whether it is just to replace Christian Pache and Whit Merrifield on the roster, whether it is a true platoon with Brandon Marsh, whether it is just somebody who takes over left field, whatever the scenario is. They do need one more bat out there because Pache and Whit Merrifield are just unacceptable. That's the one part of it. The other part of it is knowing that Jeff Hoffman and Jose Alvarado have both pitched over 42% of the team's games this year. You're going to need one more bullpen arm. You're going to need one more guy to give this team some relief when it comes to the bullpen. I'm not saying you need Mason Miller, though. And frankly, there is a chance that Mason Miller is not available. Jim Duquette explained this to Mike Gill 2 days ago on the Sports Bash. So, if the Phillies walk out of the deadline with a competent outfielder and a depth piece for the bullpen, is that good enough for you? Text board is there at 609-403-0973 and your DMs into the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. The other part of the conversation we've been having throughout the show is about the Eagles. Now that we know what the Eagles are going to be, right? We have a clear understanding of what kind of offense we can expect. What are our expectations for the players on this team? It's part of the conversation we are going to have with Andy McNamara coming up in about 15 minutes. Because when I asked this question to Rob Motti and the Jeff Mosher earlier in the show, they both kind of gave I have a theory of how it'll work, but we still have to wait and see it play out. And a lot of it comes down to, we know that this offense and this defense is going to be better this year because you have better coaches in place. You have a better environment, a better culture, a better everything than you did last year. You have a competent and experienced offensive coordinator. You have a experienced and successful defensive coordinator. So if you have these type of people in hand, you are already going to be better than last year. The question is, how much better will you be than last year? And what does being better mean for the Philadelphia Eagles? That's all part of the conversation we've been having here on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. On the DMs on 97.3 ESPN mobile app, James chimes in and says, Josh, what are your thoughts on the Phillies acquiring a Brian De La Cruz or a Lane Thomas? And what about Mason Miller? Well, I already answered the Mason Miller a little indirectly. I'm going to let Jim Duquette explain this for folks out there. I know it's a bit of a heady answer, but I think it's important to understand the larger context. This was Jim Duquette, former Major League General Manager with organizations like the Mets and the Red Sox and the Orioles. He joined Mike Gill on the Sports Bash a couple days ago and said this about Mason Miller.
If I'm Oakland, he still has his rookie status. If he ends up being Rookie of the Year this year, they get a draft pick, with the new rules that have been changed. We saw the Orioles get a draft pick this year for Gunnar Henderson being a Rookie of the Year last year. Same thing with Arizona for Corbin Carroll. So Oakland is sitting there looking at potentially another. That's a really valuable pick. I don't think Oakland can afford to trade him.
They can't afford to trade him. They value that draft pick. So that is something to keep in mind, that you may want Mason Miller, but the A's don't want to trade him this year. They'll trade him next year. Okay? So that's part of the conversation. Now, you mentioned Brian De La Cruz and Lane Thomas. Lane Thomas was a name that was mentioned a lot last year, I feel like. That was a name that I saw a lot of people bringing up last year. And the Lane Thomas question, at least for me, comes down to, are the Nationals willing to move on from him? Lane Thomas is going to turn 29 years old next month. He's not one of the younger players on our team anymore. But they are a team that is on the outside looking in of the wild card race, right? There's 6 games out of the final wild card spot. So objectively, on the outside looking in, they are out of the playoff hunt. But does being out of the playoff hunt mean that the Nationals are willing to trade a guy who has been a steady but reliable, productive player to a team in their own division? Lane Thomas has 8 homers and 38 RBI this year. An okay batting average, 252. So he is a average outfield hitter at best. The question is, if you bring him in here, you're not bringing him in to play significantly more than Rojas and Marsh. You're asking him to come in here and be a platoon player. Well, this is where maybe Lane Thomas does make sense. He is batting .350 this year against left-handed pitchers. 3 of his 8 home runs are against those left-handed pitchers, and he has a .430 on base, a .550 slug against left-handed pitching. For his career, Lane Thomas has also shown you he can do a little hitting against left-handed pitching. Lane Thomas, in his career, he does have a .310 batting average. So it's a valid name to bring up. I think of the names you brought up, James, I think that is the one that makes the most sense. The question is, again, are the Nationals willing to trade him in division, and are the Phillies willing to trade one of their prospects to a potential division rival? I don't necessarily have the answers for that. I would be inclined to feel like I wouldn't care if a player improves my team if I trade you a prospect that the percentages of that player being better than the guy you're acquiring are probably not going to be great. And you don't have to give up your top prospects to get him. You know, maybe you can give up a player or two that is not within your top 10 in terms of. I'm going to bring up the prospect rankings real quick. I mentioned I would do this yesterday, and I forgot about it when I was on game night last night. So when you pull up the Phillies' top prospects, according to MLB.com pipeline, right? The Phillies' top prospects go as follows. Andrew Painter 1, Aiden Miller 2, Justin Crawford 3, Starlin Caba 4, Mick Abel 5, Devin Saldaban is 6, Brian Racone is 7, and Eduardo Tate is 8, Gabriel Rincones Jr. is 9, and Griff McGarry is 10. So, I would be inclined, again, this is my perspective, I'm on these conversations, but if Josh Hennig was having a conversation with the Nationals front office on the phone, I would tell them, I am interested in Lane Thomas. Is there someone in my organization that is not Painter, Miller, Crawford, Caba that you would be interested in? Okay? And if they turn to me and say, Griff McGarry, I would be inclined to have that conversation. Because McGarry has still not reached the major leagues. And my concern with McGarry is he ever going to live up to the expectations that were put on him years ago? Another player you could have a conversation about is William Bergolla, because Bergolla is a guy who is playing in middle infielder, and he is obviously blocked by Bryson Stott, Trey Turner, and Aiden Miller, and Starlin Caba. Is that a guy you're willing to give up to a rival team? I'm not saying you should give up those kind of players, but that's the conversation I would have. That's where Lane Thomas is worth it if I'm not giving up a player who is going to be coming up anytime soon to play for my organization. So it's a valid question, James. I don't mind the player name. I think it's a good name to throw out there. Josh from Cape May chimes in at 609-403-0973, says, I think a decent right-handed bat and bullpen depth is good. This Phillies team has a vibe that I worry an all-star will disrupt halfway through. Well, that's why, for example, Josh from Cape May, a guy like Jazz Chisholm is a player that some people feel like would disrupt this locker room. Like, that's not a guy I want. And I don't even, like, for as much as I like Cody Bellinger, I don't even know if he's the right answer as well. I mentioned Kevin Pillar earlier. You just heard James mention Lane Thomas. I know some people have brought up Tommy Pham and the White Sox. There are players that are right-handed hitters who can platoon with Marsh, who are worthy of having that conversation about. But you're right, though. You don't want to disrupt the chemistry. You don't want to disrupt this locker room. You don't want to take away from what is making this team great right now, which is the team's chemistry. All right, get the morning text coming up a little bit later this hour. Keep them coming. 609-403-0973. Your DMs into the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle. Coming up next, Andy McNamara joins me to talk more NFL here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on a Hump Day Wednesday.
We have the...
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance engineer, he hears things differently. To the untrained ear, everything on his shop floor might sound fine, but he can hear gears grinding or a belt slipping. So he steps in to fix the problem at hand before it gets out of hand. And he knows Grainger's got the right product he needs to get the job done, which is music to his ears. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Traffic.
You come with me.
The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Josh Hennig back here filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. Let's continue the football conversation throughout the show. We are counting down the days to Eagles reporting for training camp. Although it's so weird, the Ravens had their rookies report over the weekend. I never understood, like, why does one organization have to be like, we're going to be the first one to call the rookies in? Yeah. It's like, why does all report the same day? Like, yeah, I never understood that stuff. But, yeah, I don't run the NFL, obviously, or I'd be making a lot more money. A man who knows a lot about a lot of things is Andy McNamara. The Sick Podcast is his show, and it joins me right now here on 97.3 ESPN. Andy, long time no talk. How you doing?
Yeah, Josh, good to talk to you. But you're on my show yesterday.
Yes.
Collabs, as the kids say.
So, with that being said, I'm going to steal a topic that we talked about yesterday for our conversation today, which is, we were having the conversation last night a little bit, and we'll continue it today, which is, when you evaluate the top players at different positions, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, obviously there's the real world ranking and then there's the fantasy football ranking. So for someone like you who looks at the Eagles, right, with Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley, right, how do you differentiate between, hey, this is who they are in real football and who they are in fantasy football?
Right. Well, it's a great point because there are plenty of players who are much more useful in real life football than in fantasy. Maybe they're great blockers, maybe they are distraction or can catch that key pass, but wouldn't equate to a lot of fantasy points. There's a lot of different angles you can go there. If we look at the Eagles, I think you have some real upper echelon fantasy talent. I'm not going out on a limb to say, of course, that, Jalen Hurts is a QB1. And if things all go right, you could be looking at him as a top 3 fantasy quarterback. That would not shock me at all. And then when you look at wide receiver, it's A.J. Brown. And I got to tell you, I know we were talking the other day, but to me, I have A.J. Brown in fantasy football-wise, based on quarterback talent, I have him ranked higher than Justin Jefferson, personally. Because nothing against Justin Jefferson. You put him with a good quarterback, that guy is an all-timer. But Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy, stop it. And I know there's been Sam Darnold looking good in whatever, he's looking good in practice. Show me in the game. The guy stunk since 2018. Not all his fault. So I put A.J. Brown up there. Saquon Barkley, Josh, is a real interesting one to me because he's had that injury past, right? But he busted out of it. And now he's in a really good system with the Eagles. He's away from that giant stink. And now he's with a team that doesn't have to rely on him as the sole weapon. You got a lot of weapons. Does that create opportunity? Does it hinder his fantasy value or does it elevate? That's going to be very interesting.
By the way, speaking of the Giants, I don't know how much of the Hard Knocks you saw last night, but the clips are all over the internet. As someone who is a lifelong Browns fan, who has dealt with a lot of incompetent general managers in your fandom, when you hear Joe Schoen, the Giants GM, being such a non-assertive, whimsical, whatever, I want to call him an idiot because I don't know him personally. Yeah. So, he might be a really smart guy, and I just the cameras are editing it in a way to make it look a certain way. But listen to the way he talks to Saquon and Saquon's agent, he just sounds like a wimp.
Yeah, sounds weak.
Yeah. Like for you, knowing all the bad GMs that you've gone through in Cleveland over the years, like, is there a part of you that feels for Giant fans a little bit?
No. I have no mercy or pity for any other fandom, Josh, because I suffered through 1 in 31. So too bad for everybody else. Y'all can suffer. No one felt bad for old Andy. It was, your Browns stink. Yeah, well, now look, right? No, I have no pity or sympathy for any team because I had to live through it. I still have I'm still, I don't know. There's still some psychological scarring from there, Josh. This is it hurts. So no, the Giants are a bedrock franchise, as were the Browns, and they've been really well managed overall for a very long time, except for the past several years. And it's been bad. When did they start to really go south? Was it the Pat Shurmur coach? Was it before that? Was it the what was the mustache guy? Magoo? What was his name?
Ben McAdoo.
McAdoo. I know it's some weird name. Yeah. That's
you're bringing up a lot here, man. right. One point at a time. So it started going south, like the end of the Coughlin era, because it was Jerry Reese had been the GM for a while, and I felt like they kept trying to extend the Eli era, and they didn't always build the right team around Eli. Like Eli was still, and Eagle fans know this, like Eli was still capable of having that come from behind win, because he's always got that part of him. But it was like they had Odell, and then it didn't work out, and then it was like, well, the offensive line's not getting better. And then eventually Coughlin was like, look, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I'm tired of, I've been coaching for as long as the dawn of time. I don't want to do this anymore. So then it was the same offseason that the Eagles hired Doug Peterson, that the Giants hired Ben McAdoo, because McAdoo actually interviewed for the Eagles before he took the Giants job. And that's why there's the Dan Le Batard joke. I don't know if you know the Dan Le Batard show very well, but like they do this thing where they do so-and-so looks like. And the joke on their show was Ben McAdoo looks like the guy who 30 years after high school married the girl he had a crush on in high school, but he's stuck at home with her kids from her first marriage while she's on a date. She's on a date with Doug Peterson.
What a specific reference. It's true. I don't know if I would have ever come up with that, but it's like he's trying to be like the cool like stepdad or something.
Right, but the thing is, she's on a date with Doug Peterson.
Right. It's so weird. He was terrible. He was so bad. He was out over his skis.
Yeah.
So, and then you had Gettleman, right? And he was an old school, like Gettleman, like.
But Gettleman fell in love with Daniel Jones.
Sure did. Josh, I remember I was hosting a draft party in Toronto for NFL Canada. The draft for 2019, I think, was the Daniel Jones draft, I believe. And I remember there was fans from all over, different teams. Daniel Jones gets drafted. I let out on the mic. I was like, what the beep? And Giants fans were like, what is this? What? I'm like, you could have had Daniel Jones whenever you wanted. You took him down. I was like, no, we got our guy. Well, yeah, you sure did. And he's not very good. Not very good at all. And he continues not to be very good. And they're just in a I won't even call it purgatory, because they're bad, but they're just, I don't know how to get out of it. As a Browns fan, I'll tell you this, it's going to take a bit of luck, and you're going to have to do a total reboot, I think. I don't blame Dable. I think Dable probably gets the boot at some point.
That's
and you know what? I think Dable could still be a very good NFL head coach. I don't blame him.
I mean, if I'm the Giants, do I fire Joe Schoen and keep Brian Dable?
I would. I think Dable's a damn good coach. But is it a case where you have to blow everybody? It would really have to take it. Okay, here is our plan. We know we're going to get a new GM, new front office. We're going to keep the coach. We're going to have to rebuild. And it's going to be, you're going to stink for the next 2 years and hope that things work out. If you can have that patience and build that way, which the NFL these days isn't known for, then I think you have an opportunity there. Because I do believe Dable is a good coach and can build good pieces. But right now, they're just lost, man.
Talk with Andy McNamara, the host of the Sick Podcast. Like to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts at AndyMC81 on the Twitter X platform. Speaking of quarterbacks, talk to me about Jalen Hurts, because, you have the ESPN Plus ranking of all the 80 executives, coaches, and scouts, not a top 10 quarterback. But other outlets have him ranked as a top 10 quarterback. So how does Andy McNamara evaluate a guy like Jalen Hurts, who apparently has become a polarizing figure?
I don't know how you don't have Jalen Hurts as a top 10 quarterback, personally. Like me and you have been day one truthers since before he got drafted, Josh. Before he became an Eagle, I was loving Jalen Hurts. To me, in fantasy football, he's my guy, number 2, number 3, like top 3 fantasy quarterback. But again, if we look to real life, these guys aren't ranking fantasy, they're ranking real life. Well, okay, let's look at Jalen Hurts, who is smart with the ball, who I don't feel has reached his ceiling yet. who continues to get better year over year. Did the last part of last year go bad? Yes, for the Eagles. The coaching was the reason. I think that's straightforward and pretty evident. I'm not blaming Jalen Hurts. I still think we have not seen the best football from Jalen Hurts yet. So for him not to be a top 10, name me the 9 quarterbacks better. Like Kyler Murray? No, not getting Kyler Murray. I put him above Lamar Jackson. Absolutely I do, full talent wise. Dak Prescott, I'd rather have Jalen Hurts. Like, we can run through the names, Josh. Who would you rather have and put Jalen Hurts' name beside it? More often than not, for me, I'm taking Jalen Hurts.
It's an interesting question because Lamar has 2 MVPs.
Yeah.
So we can't deny that, right? Wow. So if I would, well, he got to an AFC Championship game.
Yeah. Got the bye. No. I'm not.
Donovan McNabb lived on that reputation for a decade, man.
I would take McNabb over Lamar Jackson in their prime.
Wow.
McNabb had an arm. McNabb, you still, the strategy, Josh, I say the strategy is still to make Lamar Jackson throw the football. And until that changes for defensive coordinator, until that changes, I will not put the full respect. I don't care how many MVPs he wins or not. Not interested. Give me Jalen Hurts all day over Lamar Jackson.
So for me, the question comes down to, because the obvious guys you take ahead of Hurts are obvious, right? It's Mahomes. Mahomes is number 1, right?
Of course.
Even a Browns fan like you has to admit that Joe Burrow is a stud when he's healthy.
When healthy, absolutely.
Yeah.
The question for Burrow, can he stay healthy?
Right. Yeah. You know, Burrow's starting to enter that weird territory where it's like, you know, we want to respect him, but we can't respect his health resume. So
yeah, it seems like frailish, you know?
I don't know about frailish, but is it?
There's always something with him. He had appendicitis one time. He had the ankle. He had the wrist. You know,
right.
It's always
the knee.
Something. The knee. Yes, absolutely. Always something with Joe Burrow. But you're right. When that guy's on, like, he's absolute money. Except versus my Browns in Cleveland. Can't win that. Can't beat him.
That's true. He can win in Kansas City, but he can't win in Cleveland.
He says openly, he's like, I'm scared of Myles Garrett. They say, what are you worried about? I say, Myles Garrett.
Well, who isn't scared of Myles Garrett? I mean,
that is his nemesis. But no, Joe Burrow when healthy, absolutely. I want to see how Josh Allen does this year because I think at his best, Josh Allen is incredible. Is he going to be forced to have to do too much this year because of the lack of weapons around?
Yes, the answer is yes.
I think so too. You know, I think the Brandon Ayuk sweepstakes, now that he's openly asked for a trade, is going to be very interesting.
That whole thing is insane.
Bills,
I had Rob Mahi from the Associated Press earlier about that. He mentioned about how, you know, this is the same 49ers team where Deebo Samuel said, I wanted to be traded 2 years ago. They wouldn't trade him, and they got a deal done with him. So, like, there's a part of you that looks at it that's like, how much of this is charades and how much of this is just, you know, hey.
Negotiate.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
Because honestly, if Brandon Ayuk was available, every team should be calling who's not the Eagles, basically.
Oh, yeah. No doubt. I saw one interesting angle where if you went to the Raiders, the guaranteed money on Devontae Adams is like this year and that's it or something. And you could make like,
well, that's why the Devontae Adams rumors are out there because people are trying to create
the 49ers. Oh my God.
Well, it's so stupid. Really quick. For those who haven't seen the Netflix Receiver show, basically Adams is going on the show. Apparently he's on camera basically ripping Jimmy Garoppolo and complaining about the Raiders offense under Josh McDaniel and all this stuff. So like Adams now had to go on multiple shows, like Kay Adams Show and others, basically be like, I don't want to be traded. I love the Raiders. It's my hometown team. I've always wanted to play for this franchise. I'm not going anywhere. Now Aaron Rodgers is coming out and having to defend him. Aaron Rodgers being like, Adams never told me he wanted to be traded. I know the guy. If he says he wants to be a Raider, he wants to be a Raider. People need to stop making this stuff up. Adams' agent has come out and said, we never requested a trade. We don't want to be traded. Like, it's amazing how like one little rumor based off of Adams was hanging out with Aaron Rodgers in Egypt.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
they're friends.
It's insane.
Although I will say this. if you're the Jets, you are all in this year, one way, whether you like it or not, with the Aaron Rodgers thing. You might as well give a go at it. You might as well not be half in and make a go at a Devontae Adams or some superstar extra wide receiver.
Yeah. A couple more before I let you go. Andy McNamara joining me here on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. We mentioned Brandon Ayuk at the 49ers. Mm-hmm. Are the 49ers, if the 49ers are like the best team in the NFC, let's just for argument's sake, okay?
Okay.
Where do the Eagles fall in the next stages? Because we know there's the Lions, we know there's the Packers. I guess we throw the Rams into that conversation, right? But like, where are the Eagles? Because last year we came in the last season saying, hey, the Eagles and the 49ers are like 1A, 1B of best rosters. The Eagles obviously improved their team this offseason. So where are they number 2 to the 49ers again? Are they behind the Lions or the Packers? Like, how do you line these teams up in the NFC?
I feel the Eagles are number 2 behind the 49ers, clearly. And the reasons are this. Not only did the roster get better and get adjusted, the coaches did. They recognized those issues. There's new coordinators. You needed to make those changes, and you did. So right there, that's a bonus, not just on the roster, but on the coaching, on the strategy side. Vic Fangio's old school, and you were saying that the players are all bought in. You got a gruff old school. He's a terrible head coach, great DC.
Right.
So he's there. So now we look at, okay, the new flavor is the Detroit Lions. Love the story. But when a guy like Dan Campbell, coach-wise, great when things are going good. Rah, rah, bite him at the kneecaps, brother. Well, what happens when it doesn't go good? Things go wrong. Well, yeah, then that gets old pretty thin, or it's pretty quick. And then you're not the guy that people don't see coming. Now they know you're there. So they're not established. The Eagles are. You look at the Packers. Jordan Love, up and down season last year, overcame a lot. I will give him credit. They've improved the roster. But is he stable? I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. I feel the best stability behind the 49ers are the Eagles, who also improve. You have a winning atmosphere. You have a winning culture. You have a quarterback who's I feel is great and can get better. And you got those new coaches. So for me, Eagles are right there. By the end of the year, things go right. I wouldn't be surprised if we were talking about the Eagles maybe even as number 1.
So then who's number 3 and 4? It's the Lions and the Packers are weird because they're in the same division.
Yeah.
They both made deep playoff runs last year. Both of them took the 49ers to the brink in their games, by the way.
They did.
Okay. Jared Goff. Do you know Jared Goff has the best red zone efficiency in the NFL the last 2 seasons? Like,
underrated guy.
Not Mahomes, not Burrow, not Hurts, not anything else. It's Jared Goff, right?
Yeah.
And then Jordan Love deserves a ton of credit for finding a way to win with a subpar receiving core. And now you give him Josh Jacobs, so you upgrade the running back position behind him. The Lions have arguably the best offensive line in football. The Packers upgraded their secondary this offseason. So, like, what do you do with those 2 NFC North teams?
I'll put it like this. So let's go 49ers for the NFC. 49ers, Eagles, Lions, Rams, Packers.
You really put the Rams?
I really like the Rams roster. Now, there is a lot of question marks on it. And this all depends on injuries for every team, but especially this team. Because for Matthew Stafford, there's no escapability. If Jalen Hurts is having an off day, my arm hurts, he can run. Matthew Stafford's having an off day, he's throwing 3 picks. And that's it. And he's going to be on his butt. You got Cooper Kupp. Phenomenal. We know that. But he's also been banged up. Kyron Williams, I like in the running game. Everything is in place for it to go well. So if we're taking away the what if of injury, and they've won a Super Bowl, by the way. So I like that Rams team as it's built there, as if you put them as that number 4. And then I'll put the Packers after that with Jordan Love and see what he can do in year 2. And then after that, Josh, boy, then it's, maybe you got to put the Cowboys in there. I think they're just going to bomb out. But, you put them in that lump with who else? Maybe the
Cowboys,
Seahawks? No.
Cowboys depend on what you think of 2 people, Mike Zimmer and Dak Prescott. That's what that seems to come down to. Because if you think Dak is a top 10 caliber quarterback, then that team offensively will be fine. And if you think Mike Zimmer will be as good or better than Dan Quinn has been, then the defense will be fine. But if either one of those guys is not able to do the job, that team, as you said, they're going to drop right down.
Well, like Josh, if you tell me if this is the year 2020 and you show me the running back chart of the Cowboys, I'm like, Zeke Elliott, yeah, real good. 2024, Zeke's averaging 2.9 yards a carry. Not so good. Yeah. Not so good. So they got no running game. You're going to be going committee form. There were Rico Dowdle, Deuce Vaughn, Royce. Come on. You can rotate these guys in a revolving door. It doesn't matter. And the receiver side, outside of CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks can run. He can get injured, but he can run. But that's it. You don't have that depth there. Jake Ferguson's fine.
That's why I'm saying it comes down to Dak.
Well, in regular season, Dak is usually fine. It's kind of playoff, like with Romo, right? It was like, yeah, and then the playoffs, he sucked.
I gotta say, before I let you go, I think Dak is better than Romo.
I do as well.
Because the one thing
is both didn't have much playoff success.
But here's the thing. It's not Dak's fault that the defense imploded against the Packers last year.
Right.
It's not Dak's fault that the defense couldn't stop a end of game drive against the 49ers a couple of years ago. Yeah. It's not Dak's fault when the defense fails. Now, if you told me Dak keeps throwing interceptions in the red zone in the postseason, then I'd be like, all right, Dak, he's Andy Dalton, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like when the Bengals went 0 for 6, right, in the postseason under Marvin Lewis,
Yes, always wanted to nothing. Look at you defending Dak Prescott on a Wednesday.
Huh? I can't believe I'm doing that. The world must be going backwards. Andy, tell the folks what you got coming up on the pod.
Oh, well, I got you on the pod, brother. I got you on the pod this week. We're going week by week Browns opponents, so we're talking Eagles this week, so you definitely want to check that out. Josh and I go through a lot more fantasy football. We dive in depth as well. That's on YouTube, The Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara on the Twitter X platform, at SickPodBrowns, at AndyMC81. We got the link there, and Instagram and TikTok at AndyMC Sports. And if you like horse racing, follow at My Railbirds.
All right, go be a dad. You're allowed to go.
All right. Okay. Baseball time. See you, buddy.
See you. Andy McNamara joining me here on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. And my conversation with Andy McNamara being brought to you by Boxing Insider Promotions, bringing you the boxing event of the summer, Friday, July 26th, where undefeated junior middleweight Justin Figueroa returns to action inside Tropicana Atlantic City showroom, along with other great fighters like Otto Wallin, one of the top-ranked heavyweights in the world, along with Absecamby High School graduate Bruce Sullivan Jr. Get your tickets right now at Ticketmaster.com for the boxing event of the summer. Always action-packed Boxing Insider Promotion events. You don't want to miss any of the action. Friday, July 26th. And don't forget 97.3 ESPN. We'll be at the fights that night. We will be watching the fights. So come out and join 97.3 ESPN. I'll be broadcasting live with Game Night that night following Mike Gill's Happy Hour Friday on the Sports Bash. Come out, hang out with us. Listen, you get the whole day planned for you. You got Happy Hour Friday with Mike Gill at Giuliano's. Stop by, say hi, hang out with Mike Gill, maybe win some Green Day Smashing Pumpkins tickets, and then head over to Atlantic City, EHT Atlantic City, not a far drive, Tropicana Atlantic City. The fights start at 7 o'clock, and you can come out and watch the fights, Friday night fights. You can't miss all the great action that will be at Tropicana in Atlantic City showroom Friday, July 26th. Again, tickets on sale right now at Ticketmaster.com. We'll wrap up the show. Coming up next, Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
All right, Josh Hennick wrapping up the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget, no game night tonight when I fill in for Mike Gill. There is no power hour from 6 to 7, but you can hear my conversation with Rob Motti and more from earlier in the show. Want to wrap up the show getting into a couple. We usually do the big three during the hour, and so I want to hit on a couple of news stories, just from around, just to kind of like get some perspective on some of the news stories from around the world of sports, basically. And a couple of them that stand out to me. So, number one, we always talk about if someone's healthy, right? If fill in the blank team is healthy, then what? Well, Chris Middleton is recovering from having surgery on both of his ankles. Now, if you told me Chris Middleton was healthy, then him and Giannis and Lillard and now Gary Trent Jr., that makes a formidable lineup. But Middleton has missed 55 games last year. He's now having to recover from getting arthroscopic surgery on both of his ankles. I'm really starting to wonder, are the Milwaukee Bucks are they going to be a team that is just not going to work out? I don't know what the answer to that is. I feel like we always talk about, are the Sixers and Embiid going to be healthy, right? But the Bucks are starting to fall in that conversation. Giannis got injured last year. There were a lot of problems for Milwaukee last year. And I'm starting to wonder, is that team ever going to get it right? Are they ever going to be healthy? Especially with Middleton now having multiple surgeries. That's my first story I want to hit on really quick. Second one is, so this Saturday is the WNBA All-Star game. It's going to be the WNBA All-Stars facing the U.S. women's basketball team on primetime ABC. Well, we have a new reason to watch. So for those who don't know, the Olympic team is being coached by Minnesota Lynx head coach Cheryl Reese, who she has been very open and public about her. She's tired of hearing about Caitlin Clark. She's tired of people cheering for her. She has Caitlin Clark fatigue. Well, the woman who's going to be coaching the WNBA All-Stars is going to be women's basketball legend Cheryl Miller, the older sister of Reggie Miller. For those who don't know, if there was a WNBA, 10 years or 15 years earlier than it was, Cheryl Miller would have been the superstar of that league. She was better than dudes were back in the day. So now you have a mega talent star in Cheryl Miller, who's now going to be giving words of wisdom to Caitlin Clark. I mean, this girl is only going to get better. It's absolutely wild. So, very cool scenario. Again, the All-Star game will be Saturday night on ABC. I'm going to be fascinated. Is Cheryl Reeve going to keep complaining about Caitlin Clark the whole time? And former UFC heavyweight champion John Jones, legal troubles again. There's questions if he's going to be able to fight again later this year. He's pled not guilty to a pair of misdemeanors, charged from a drug arrest. I mean, come on. What a mess. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Sports Bash. Catch you tomorrow, 973.